It starts with a simple question and ends in objective reality. Through our journey from there to here, we find one another and ourselves. And as the next 24 hours breaks free from our last, we gaze onward in reflection of the day.
Come to your own conclusions. Stay vigilant.
Welcome to the Daily Wrap-Up.
Thursday, April 23rd, 2026. Thank you for joining me today. An interesting surge in the conversation that I'm sure you're all very aware of. Now, what we've been talking about for quite a long time, this conversation's been had long before I've ever been doing this, about divide and conquer, right? About using passionate arguments, contentious ideas to divide the people to benefit the government, or, whatever the power structure may be in that circumstance. So what's interesting is that suddenly, in the midst of this massive blunder for the U.S. government, clearly Trump's administration, but if you're paying attention, it's just the U.S. government. It's the same U.S. government agenda that was going on when Biden was in power. And my point is, with this massive blunder that's happening, you have this interesting, many of them, as I'm kind of pointing out with smaller versions on Twitter, but deflections, distractions, which are always, that's a political common tactic. But to discuss something in an interesting way that I think has been used in massive whole of government agendas, using racism, the Azov movement conversation, that you can clearly prove, as we'll go through again, not as extensively as the 35 times we've done it over the last 10 years, but to make sure you see the points in the previous shows you can look into, that this is something that has been done across multiple governments, across multiple administrations, left and right, really going back to the Aerodynamic, but I believe it was Operation or Project Aerodynamic, I believe, which is a CIA operation to arm and fund fascist elements, using that term in particular, arming a person named Mykola Lebed. I can't even say it right now for some reason. And I've talked about this many times over the years, and he was an a Nazi war criminal that the U.S. government literally brought to the United States and set up in a media company in New York, as well as in Ukraine. Now, this is all very documented. I'll show you everything we go through today. And this was something that from that point was built into what looked like a normal part of the government and media, or whatever at the moment they were trying to implement, that today is what it is, looking like it's part of the government and the police force and everything else, in order at the time to be used against the Soviet Union. And whatever element they want to use, these psychological manipulative, elements. So all the way to today, we have the interesting surge of the Azov movement, the Russia-Ukraine conversation. Now, we'll go through again. There's so many moving parts to this, like there are with a lot of these long-term operations that I think are just kind of like carryover manipulations that just reuse and it gets lost in the mix, like gets clumsier as it goes forward. That this is something that I believe was used at the time to create the sort of invasion of the country from the mind of the mad Nazi Republicans, and allowing that to happen through this country. Now, that may sound crazy to people if you never heard this before, but you realize this is, in fact, the same thing that you're hearing from any argument from any side if you stand back and look at the long-term conversation. They're trying to do this through this mechanism. They're trying to do that through that mechanism. Both sides pointed out. And so what's interesting is, if for some reason it feels difficult for people to stand back and go, oh, it's all of them. It's the government doing it to us and not the other way, not individually against each other, but the government, so we fight each other. Now, we'll go over this today in regard to the Southern Poverty Law Center and the conversation that the U.S. government put out, by the way, which was just an indictment. You know my opinion. I think it's very obvious that they've been funding and agent provocateur type elements, infiltrating groups or creating them themselves. Again, this is not theory. This is a recognizable tactic throughout history. And what's interesting, though, is to see that this is so in your face. And so obviously across the government, and then it comes out through this administration in an effort to make it sound like the Democrats did this, even though you could prove the overlapping agendas going from both sides of this and the whole of government agenda within it all. And we'll get into what that means today and how it plays through all of this. But what I think is humorous, like we keep showing, is this kind of flailing effort to make it seem like, just one, that Trump's somehow winning, but to deflect into anything else you can point to. Obama's going to jail, just give it time. As I said, he is a criminal. He deserves to be in prison. But we'll go through the indictment, which is just an accusation, because that's why I said I do believe there's allegations and crimes going on, but this is just an indictment, which means, as you have come to probably see, how much you want to bet nothing happens. I want people to go to jail for obvious crimes, left or right. I doubt it happens. If they have yet to put Obama or any other people that they keep screaming about and keep telling you they have evidence for in jail or even gone into investigations, then they're not going to do anything about this unless there's an easy scapegoat, and it won't be the people that you want. So we'll go through this all today and how this connects, but I think it's a really important thing to stress to begin the show today, how we need to start looking at this as an all of government tactic. Like, even if there are elements that are driven more by a left agenda or right agenda, it doesn't behoove you to look at it that way, because it's still the government that you're dealing with. And if you put all of your effort into the other side, all that will happen is a Trump Kamala forever, right? This dynamic where it's like, well, they were bad now, so let's give him a shot. Well, and then it comes back, well, he's terrible now, let's give that new person a shot. Left and right and left and right, and they bank on this, and that's why nothing ever changes. Even if they don't see that, even if we do see change happening, as I'll point out today, I had it's already out. I had a good conversation with Kim Iverson about this very point, about seeing that people are changing, which, I think we can see them starting to change their opinions, questioning the two-party illusion, which is why I think the larger part of this is the transition of society into a different type of governance. But that aside, she's right to point out that we can see through these different shifts that people are starting to call out the differences of the parties. We don't want war. We don't want Iran, or rather, war with Iran or war anywhere. But my point was, okay, what's that lead to? The next time somebody new saying, well, they'll be different. But we can look back, person after person after person after person, of hearing that same argument. The lesser of evils, the most important election of our lifetimes. Now, that's not to say that can't be the world we live in. The point is, right now, these circumstances, that is not what's happening. And we need to become, it's naive to pretend like that's not where we are. So on top of that part, I'm going to, the point about the Southern Poverty Law Center and the Azov movement and the interesting overlap with October 7th and how all of this interconnects with Israel, with foreign policies. It's a very clear and interconnected conversation. We'll also talk about, starting today, cannabis. Interestingly, as you know, I'm very passionate about this topic. I genuinely think this is just a complete ploy, like many of the others, to get you to look anywhere else and to maybe throw them a bone. Maybe, see, look, I care about you. Maybe you can look at it from a extra health, we're giving you more health options. Over here, you can look at it because I care about your freedom. But guess what? None of those things are really happening. We'll go through the point of what this really means to move it from Schedule 3 to Schedule 1, neither of which are actually legitimate, or rather correct. And how that is a manipulation, because it doesn't really functionally change anything other than more access to things that you should already have access to through a system that's going to manipulate it, likely through GMO and God knows what else. And that's the only place you can get it now. That's how this goes. But we'll also talk about a couple other important conversations that connect around this, largely the Iran conversation to finish, because you need to be updated on what that still is, the insanity of it. But I'll tell you what, like I said, the last show we did, you could have watched this show a week ago, and you would right now, despite the new events that have happened, the different ships will point to, the different exchange, just briefly, because it's really no change in the conversation if you understand where this is, that you already knew what was going on. There's been exchanges, there's new narratives, but at the end of the day, we're still at that point where Iran says 10-point plan or nothing. We're not engaging unless you do that. And the only reason they went to the last negotiation in Islamabad is because I think they offered all 10 points and then lied about it. And that's why we're back here we are. It's like, but it's important to see where it goes, because it can and will connect to pretty much everything else in this conversation today. And as well as point to end with Lebanon, that is very much a part of this, that has always been happening before this point. And I mean, always is not the right term, 70 something, 79 forward occupation of Lebanon still going on today. And I argue it will continue well after this if Israel is not stopped. Now, quick point to this. Good conversation today. I enjoyed talking with her. And the title actually is just one interesting part we got into in the larger part of the conversation, but it was a great conversation about a lot of the different lies. And we start with a conversation about the interesting obviousness of so many things that we all seem to see, which, I agree with, but yet gets framed as nobody sees it in the left-right paradigm. It's interesting. But also the point about this, we talk about neuroscience and the different things that may be affecting him. And I make the argument, which I always do. One of the possibilities is that's just who he is and he hasn't changed, which is largely what I think, which is I said in the show. But check it out. Good conversation. Good to get TLAV out there in front of people that would otherwise not see it, guys, because we are very much suppressed in the conversation. So starting with this, Trump's reclassifies state licensed medical marijuana. So that's right out of the gate. That's important. One of the main things that we've talked about, anybody who's been fighting for just decriminalization, which it's always ever been about. Legalization, sure, positive step. All it really means, though, is you're still being allowed things that should be your right to do regardless. The state should not have any insight or should not have any ability to step into your personal life and decide what you as an adult can put in your body. That's insane when you really think about it. Now, if you do something and cause danger to somebody else, well, now you're stepping into other areas of criminality or whatever, accountability, which whether or not you took a drug or whatever else has no real bearing on whether or not you do something that, the point is it's the actions, not the actual, when it comes to personal choice. If we really get into the nuance of it, everybody seems to agree with the sentiment, but when it comes down to the thing, well, that's a bad thing though. So I suddenly don't stand with the principle, or, it's hypocrisy. Because if you look into it, they'll always argue that it's your choice and freedom, but there are limits. Well, guess what? There's not. That's the reality. You can decide you want to change things, and let's decide we don't want to care about the Constitution anymore. Hey, you could make that argument. But if you want to argue that this is a constitutional right, you can't then start carving out limits, whether fire in a theater or anything else. It's the reality, guys. So be honest, be intellectually honest about these conversations. If you believe fire in a theater is something that should exist, where if I yell that and lie about it and somebody gets hurt, that I'm responsible, well, then you truly don't believe in free speech. And that's not that. Maybe that's okay. Maybe there shouldn't be totally free speech. Maybe it should be extremely limited, or rather lightly limited, mostly free speech. I don't agree with that. But this is my point, is these are the real kind of conversations we should be having, because people out there pretending they believe in free speech, but yet arguing that, they're either confused or dishonest. And so here we have a point where you have the government stepping in and going, well, guess what? We're going to give you back something that we took from you. But guess what? Not really, though. We're going to say you can have this version that we create as long as you go through my group and pay taxes on it and go to this person and get a license for it. Sure. And we'll pay and charge throughout the whole process. And then just trust that you don't put something bad in this stuff like you do everything else in our lives. Now, I hate to be such a downer about this, because it's still, I think, a positive step from a place where it was wildly illegal. But you have to understand that this is not really a win when all they're doing is turning something that should be natural into something unnatural, and turning something that should be free into something that they control. That's really the most honest way to put that. Now, it says, this came out today, President Donald Trump's acting attorney general on Thursday signed an order reclassifying state licensed medical marijuana. So that means any other kind that you grow anywhere else or that's not state licensed, it's still technically Schedule 3, which is so unbelievably stupid, unless I'm misunderstanding that. Because you have to understand, Schedule 3 is stupid. Every one of these things have verifiably, extensively, through peer-reviewed science, despite all the lies about that, have been shown. This is not addictive. It's not dangerous. It's not, there will still be people to this very day who scream that I'm wrong about that. And it blows my mind, just like they'll tell you COVID shots are the safest thing in the world. And that's left and right, mind you. But state licensed medical marijuana. Oh, the point was, so if you keep not state licensed marijuana in Schedule 3, then what you're arguing is cannabis in its natural state is in the highest level of danger and the highest level of addictiveness. Even they're arguing that's not the case. You have to understand that going back far enough, and I get away from this topic, I'll be here all day. You can point to 1986, I believe, was the year when there was a mainstream report even about a woman who was smoking cannabis joints out of a tin that she was given by the government because of her cancer or whatever it was, all the way back then. Now, whether that was a study or not, the idea that you can give them that under the guise of medical treatment and have it on Schedule 3, even if you're considering the medical possibilities, means you're lying. And they always have, guys. It's because of 1,000 other things than just the fact. It's, as I've always said, take away smoking. Let's say you take away the psychoactive elements of this. And I shouldn't say it like that, because there are elements within that are what add to some of the health practices. But let's just say you can't get high from it, no matter what it is. Take that away. Somehow make it impossible for us to do that. This plant will change the world. And again, people act like you're so crazy but they're wrong. That includes hemp. That includes in many variations, including ruderalis, by the way, which most people don't even know about. The reality, though, is that this has a massive effect on the way the world operates, whether it's textiles or fuel or anything. And the stifling of that has really changed the way the world operates. I can get into so many things about the natural state of this. Your body has natural it's an endocannabinoid system. You have natural receptors for cannabinoids that actually take place in the suckling process when a woman has a baby. And this is whether or not you've ever consumed cannabis. This is a naturally occurring endocannabinoid system. You don't have a system for everything that exists in the world. And this is something that's been taken away from you. There's a thing called the entourage effect when smoking cannabis at its whole state, or rather back to the point, consuming it, put it in a blender, make a shake out of it. And you will end up having effects that synergize. Like it works together in such a powerful way to heal your body. And again, guys, these are studies. I mean, Sanjay Gupta did an entire thing about this on CNN, and yet we still get shouted. Okay, I digress. The point here, I haven't even got past the first sentence. The point here, guys, is that this is just obviously a deception for the powers that shouldn't be. Whether you want to go back to the Hearst family and the timber industry or the paper, the paper pulp that was used and all the different connected points that they saw as a very real threat to one of the largest industries of the time to shut down. They called it the Mexican marijuana scourge, and they made it about the immigration. That's what it was, guys. It was immigration and the Mexicans bringing in their dangerous marijuana, even though at that moment they were using the same stuff for rope and for hemp sales and everything, even still at that time, and plenty of other things. And they didn't know. The average person didn't realize they were being tricked into hating the thing that they needed, that they utilized everywhere. Isn't it crazy how much? I mean, see, this is such a fascinating conversation. And over the years, I've told you, this is what got me into everything. This topic seems to connect to damn near everything. But anyway, the order signed by Todd Blanche does not legalize marijuana. Let me grab one thing real quickly. Cannabis deception. And then this one. I wrote these a long time ago, but you should check these out, because this gets into the points I'm making right now about the medical side of it, the natural side, whether or not you've ever consumed cannabis or whether or not you ever want to smoke or ingest THC. The reality is that there is a lot of important medical things that have been taken away. I'll include both these. One's from the Substack. That's one popped up. On a note, by the way, that I forgot to bring up, I don't want to waste too much time on it since it's kind of in the middle already, but the website has officially been updated. We were lucky enough, the guy working on my website, the guy who works with a couple of ours in the background, kind of manages on his own server. It's a personal thing, so it's not like a company. Thank God, finally. We remember we went away from HostGator to work with them. He's amazing and has literally been working on this for a while now and actually effectively got it to look identical. There was at first a couple of issues. We were thinking, as I'm telling you, we were thinking about trying to use another theme because of old mistakes that were made. And as of right now, it looks fantastic. So let me know. It should be faster for you, and it shouldn't. If you see any mistakes or any issues from what you saw before, let us know and we can correct that. Anyway, just on that note, it's nice. I'm glad to have that happening because at the end of the day, we've been dealing with a lot of weirdness on the website. But back to the point. Cannabis Destiny gets into the general topic of what the world could be like should this actually have been allowed to flourish and the literal connection to your health system. And then we talk about, this one's called The Cannabis Deception, How Your Government Stole Your Future, and gets into, oh wait, this is the same. I guess I retitled it when I posted it again. Anyway, I'll include both those so you can check them out. Now, what's weird is you think about the cannabis side of this. Now, think about every other thing that we know that's been stifled that could help you and why. The order signed by Todd Blanche does not legalize marijuana for medical or recreational use under federal law. Okay. So what does it mean then, Ryan? But it does change the way it's regulated. So it's all a big play. Shifting licensed medical marijuana from Schedule 1, only licensed, reserved for drugs without medical use and high potential abuse, which neither of those things apply to the cannabis, to marijuana, cannabis, hemp, whatever, to the less strictly regulated Schedule 3, but still regulated and controlled by the government. It also gives licensed medical marijuana operators, the ones the government want to work with, a major tax break and eases some barriers to researching cannabis. So I'm going to get into the GMO overlap to this, guys, that I talked about a long time ago. I wrote, that's this one here. I wrote this back in 2015. We'll talk about it in a second. And this is very much a part of the current industry. So ask yourself, the current government that's leaning aggressively into GMO everything, despite what they said, still working on mRNA shots and self-amplifying, by the way. Ask yourself, and I don't mean GMO necessarily as much foods as it was in the past, but just genetically modified organisms in all different parts of our lives. Do you think that they're going to lean in with the companies that work with those? the ones that work with the government, the ones that do it in a way that can have, whatever they tell you this will benefit, even if it has higher yields and better everything, but comes along with potential environmental issues or potential immunocompromised issues or whatever else has been associated cancers with the use of genetically modified organisms. It says it also gives licensed medical marijuana operator, the tax break. So my point was if they're willing to play ball. And it says some barriers to research. This is such a frustrating point. Look, there are barriers to research of cannabis. Despite that, it's still been done extensively over the last 20 years. Study after study after study. And yet they go, oh, well, it's not the one that we agree with, or so it just technically doesn't count. The Trump administration also said it was jump-starting the process for reclassifying marijuana more broadly. Mark my words, that won't happen unless it's in their interest to do so. If you were to remove it, if you reclassified more broadly, can only mean off the schedule since we're at Schedule 1, then that would mean they couldn't regulate it the same way, and I doubt they'll ever allow that. Blanche's actions largely legitimizes medical marijuana programs in 40 states that have adopted them. Well, guess what, Blanche and federal government? We don't need you to legitimize what states have legalized. That's called states' rights. But see, you guys don't care about these things. We don't need them to tell us what is and isn't okay for our bodies. At the end of the day, them legitimizing this, in my mind, makes it worse. Makes me worried. It sets up an expedient system, for the state licensed medical marijuana producers and distributors to register with the DEA. Great. So now the DEA is going to register and work with cannabis. How funny is that? Just say no. Now, beyond these ones we included, which, by the way, I really swear I just want to go into those like crazy. There's so many important things in there about the cannabinoid system that you should check out, but for another day. I'll include this show as well, which I really think is important. And each one of these connects to its own article, like its own deeper intended article to go into that one topic. I put a lot of time into this, and I still stand by almost every single part of this. And even the other parts I might say I would change or just, what's the term I'm looking for? Just to keep it, just what I wrote then. And I wouldn't even really change it, just add to it. But 10 myths about marijuana that no one should believe. Part 1, marijuana is more harmful than cigarettes, alcohol, and prescription drugs. False. And we go through each one of them. Nail it down, right? Marijuana is highly addictive. Incorrect. Marijuana causes schizophrenia. Now, I understand, these are not my opinions. I'm using science. I'm using research study. I'm using all the stuff that they would use to tell you it's bad. And in response, what you get is gateway theory and nonsense, which, by the way, is in there as well, the gateway theory. Now, again, I digress. Now, here's the schedule, in case you haven't seen this. This is just embarrassing to me. Okay, so right now, what was a Schedule 1, right? Cannabis. I don't care how much you think you hate it. Next to heroin? No. Right? Next to acid, LSD? Oh, crap. That sucks. I'll have to go and look at that. Sorry, for the podcast, I just highlighted everything and removed what I had highlighted. And then, of course, ecstasy, peyote, right? I mean, this is just incredible. Like, especially for those that have never, ever tried it, again, aside from the many, many other benefits than just smoking it, clearly have never done it because they understand how insane that is. But if you have, and the fact that you can argue that it's in any way close, in any sense, it's just embarrassing. But okay, Schedule 3. Let's just skip Schedule 2, which is what, cocaine and everything else, which was, by the way, that's what they said before. It was Schedule 3. Meanwhile, cocaine is Schedule 2. So they've been telling you your entire life that cocaine is less addictive and less dangerous than cannabis. Same with all of them. Oxycontin. Are you kidding me? They want you to believe that Oxycontin this entire time has been less dangerous and less addictive. Insane. Schedule 3, which is where it is now. Where are we? Codeine, right? Vicodin. Seriously? This is how stupid they think we are. Ketamine. Steroids. Anabolic steroids. I mean, it's just ridiculous, guys. And Schedule 4, Xanax, Soma, Darvocet. That's an opioid. Are you telling me that so still the point is you're telling me that it's Darvocet is less dangerous, that Xanax is less dangerous and less addictive than cannabis? God, they're either that stupid or that's how dishonest they are. You know what I think? A little bit of both. Now, the reason I'm so concerned about this with where it is now is that I've been watching this for a long time, and this is why I try to work with people that I know, like it's like knowing your farmer in any context. You go to the farm. I want to see the cow. I want to know what you're growing it with. I want to understand your process. I don't want to just trust your word these days, right? The idea is that this has been blending for a long time, to the point to where anything mainstream, I don't trust it anymore. I don't know whether or not this has happened. In fact, I'm going to argue it has. Now, I wrote this back in 2015. I brought this up in the past. Prairie Plant Systems Inc. See, I've been saying it wrong. That's the company that was in Canada. And then my article was that at the time this was happening, right? The point was cannabis may already be genetically modified. This was the company that was getting the license to grow cannabis in Canada. And they were pretty much the main company looking at trying to do what? Put drugs in food or in, vegetation, like we talked about, vaccines in plants, antidepressants in vegetables. Studies are right here. This is what they were trying to do. And funny how today we find out, we're working on transgenic vaccines, right? And so I'm worried this has already happened, guys. But call me crazy, even though there's science you can look at, right? It's just that's how willfully ignorant people can be today. Because I'm supposed to think that's crazy. Well, here's a peer-reviewed study where they literally tried to do it. But here is 2016. So that article, 2015, 1 year later, Monsanto, Bayer, and the push for corporate cannabis. Critics note that the hundreds of millions of tax revenues that UAMA is expected to generate, not a penny will go to the California General Fund. That's local politics. The point is, major push for the corporate side. What is Monsanto? GMO. That's what this is. Now Bayer, same thing. This is 2018. Investors rush to patent genetically modified cannabis molecules, like everything else. And this, if you have to understand this topic, in my opinion, this has long since been done. So all you can do is try to find in any product you're looking at, something that you can trust the person, whether they're heirloom seeds and they grow themselves. I mean, that's where we have to be today. It's unfortunate. Your governments and of the world did this to you. This is from the March 2023. Genetically modified cannabis, what you need to know about the controversial topic. Just a couple of additional points I thought were interesting. Now, what is it? It says genetically modified cannabis, also known as GMO cannabis, not like the acronym for the popular strain, by the way, which I don't think is an accident, is a cannabis plant that has been modified through genetic engineering techniques. This could involve adding, deleting, or modifying genes in the plant's DNA to produce specific traits or characteristics. Now, take a second and absorb that, whether that's food or anything else, or your injections. That's always been the concern with what we talk about, with the Charles Lieber, Robert Langer overlap and what their work on. And remember Langer being the co-founder of the Moderna shot from the scientific side. They're working on this kind of weird, and not to get into it all, the point is that you can delete or modify things or add things. Well, what if you delete the things that make it more beneficial for you? What if you add things that cause other effects? You people out there want to go, that's just crazy. They would never do that, except the 1,000 examples where I can prove they've done that. Some people just don't ever want to absorb it because I get it. It's scary. COVID was one of them, if you don't want to acknowledge that. My point, though, is that whatever we're talking about today, when you get into the really alarming stuff that we know they're working on, that opens the door wide open to a category of people that they see as adversarial, as rebels worth thinking about. There are several reasons why people are concerned about genetically modified cannabis. First, there are worries about the potential health effects of consuming genetically modified cannabis products. Some studies have shown that genetically modified crops can lead to increase in allergies and other problems like cancer. Yes, not some studies, and a litany of studies, usually counterbalanced by the funded Monsanto study that the government points to. Not a joke. Unintended consequences on ecosystems and biodiversity. At some point, if it's that ubiquitous, well, this is the whole overlap discussion where it's like the farm salmon point. At some point, it's just no longer even organic ever because it's all blended together and then it just becomes organic because now that's all there is. Farm salmon. That's all. There is no wild salmon, in case you missed the point. And the same point when it comes to the Monsanto overlap with the seeds patented and blowing into the next field and saying, now we own your I mean, that's just the patent side of it. But again, whatever dangers you have can spread. Finally, there are ethical concerns about the corporate control of the cannabis industry. If genetically modified cannabis becomes the norm, it could lead to a handful of large corporations controlling the entire market, with little room for small independent growers. Well, gee, if that doesn't sound like every single market in this country. That's the point. Now here is just a random article I came across while I was trying to, or a Reddit thread. I've tried hundreds of strains. GMO is the best. Now guess what that stands for? It stands for, apparently, Girl Scout Cookies X Chemdog stands for garlic, mushroom, onion. or some kind of combination of those two. I'm thinking to myself, okay, and this was 2 years ago, right about the same time that was being discussed at the peak. And I'm thinking, okay, and by the way, if you look into this, it appears to be one of the many that are made from that level of genetically modified. So is this simply done to cover up worth asking? I'm not going to say I know for sure because I don't. It could just be coincidence. But I tend to look at those overlaps and go, was there a reason that Stu Peters made his documentary Died Suddenly with Quotes, so that when you look up Died Suddenly with Quotes, when before that you would get all of the died suddenly examples, because that's how Google works. When you quote words, it gives you all the examples of it. And before that, you would get died suddenly in a million reports of people that died suddenly. And then after it came out suddenly, you only got examples from a documentary that was later shown to be very manipulative, and people involved with it said they were lied, misrepresented about, the saying, gee, I wonder. I'll let you decide. Now, moving forward, please do more research on that topic if you're not familiar with cannabis and the rest of it. It's an important conversation. And I believe it has a very important kind of foundational element to the way we've been manipulated, at least in my lifetime. And I think it's important to understand what that is. Now, speaking of the larger manipulations, guys, and whether that itself was to deflect from something else or just simply to make you think he's trying to fight for you, when I don't believe that's the case, don't forget, just like Maxwell. Oh, do you remember the Epstein file? What was that again? That whole thing about something, I forget now. We all just don't talk about it anymore. It's insane to me. I tweeted it out the other day. It was just like, let's not forget that this all happened. Got like one like, no. And that's, I think, because the platform wildly suppresses it. That's impossible to me that wouldn't get engagement, or that like 100 views when you got 8,000 followers. But either way, even though it's being suppressed, it is still, there's a lot going on. Even I'm not talking about as much as we were. But how is that possible? How can you go through what we obviously all saw and then because what it shows you is not that we all drift away, it's that there's just no accountability. Not left, not right, none of it. And so we can all stand here and be like, wait, this didn't happen. Nobody went to jail. And all the big screaming team sport partisan left and right players will yell over the top of you and drive many people. And yet we can stand there. And you're right to do so, because it shouldn't have, but everyone just keeps moving. So most of us go, oh, okay, all right, we tried, we move to the next story. We keep talking about that way. Hey, look at this. You're being lied to. So what we need to engage with in that is that right there should have happened. That should have broke. It should have blown open, but it didn't. And that shows you, in my opinion, more than anything, the two-party illusion, right? I mean, you really think about it. Now, Maxwell again asks a judge to vacate her sex trafficking conviction and release her. I'm telling you, I feel like this is going to happen. I feel like it was likely going to happen in the beginning. And then we drifted by, and it got pushed back a little bit, but there was weird rumblings. There was the proffer agreement, which, by the way, enough should have angered everybody. It did anybody paying attention. She was already given a pass for crimes she committed. But then, it kind of just went into the background. But now this has been coming up. And I think this is the plan. I think this is what they agreed to with her, my opinion. Todd Blanche and the documents exchange. And I think it was just uncomfortable at the time. So she's bringing it back up. Now, it says Maxwell submitted her new request, which she wrote herself, to federal prosecutors in New York, who said they received a FedEx envelope marked with a ship date of April 26. Well, gee, that went fast, didn't it? For somebody in prison. That contained a USB drive with a defendant's amended motion and exhibits. According to the letter, the district court was posted online early Monday morning. Prosecutors, however, did not disclose the details of her argument, which I find odd. I mean, seems like this has been very publicized, which has not yet been filed in the public docket. What if it never gets published or filed? Remember that, because I may move on. Think about that. If this doesn't get filed, somebody put that in front of me. But said it, quote, seems to have some overlap with her original motion to dismiss that district and appellate courts rejected in 2024. Now, if that's the argument for why it never gets filed, that's BS. Either way, this should be something that is filed. So if the argument, well, there's overlap, I'm wondering, just my instinct, it could be wrong, what did she send to them? What is she sending with her drive and ever the information? Is there something in there? Is there a threat going on there saying you better get me out of here soon or something's going to come out? This is all completely hypothetical, but we have to realize who we're talking about here and what that represents. I think it's interesting. And I think what's interesting is that the U.S. Supreme Court subsequently declined to hear her appeal. But that's in 2024, right? What happens right now with the push and with what's going on? Is there pressure being applied there? Just hypothetical. Just the real point is, I can't believe that this is how this ended up. And I also really think that she's going to be let out and Trump's probably going to be the one responsible. And there'll be a narrative around it. Don't forget, Newsmax even tried to argue that she was innocent, like right in the midst of this. That's not by accident. Al Jazeera. U.S. House Oversight Committee Chair James Comer says some panel members are open to U.S. President Donald Trump pardoning Ghislaine Maxwell to secure her cooperation in the Epstein files investigation. You know, the one they told you was over. Shut up, right? But now we can get Ghislaine Maxwell to step up and oh my gosh, then we can help us with the investigation we told you was over. I mean, it's insane how much they're drowning within their own lies right now. Now, whether lies or not, in the sense of this, that the point was with the Epstein files, because of the moment, it was inconvenient that we're done. We put it all out. What do you mean file? What list Todd Blanche embarrassingly pushes back on? So what is there to go forward on? So they were lying then. That's obvious because there was more, which they told us. So now if the argument is we partner to help the investigation, every single honest Republican or honest person should be standing up and going, I call your bluff. That's ridiculous. And this has been rumbling from the beginning of this, which I think she's going to be let off. Now, in the conversation of the partisan side of this, as I said before, a lot of deflection, which just quickly to go over many of the examples that I've seen hundreds of every single day. From what I noticed the big difference of is like not the random, like some of them the same, the MAGA voice or whatever that are just like these blind accounts, but like the Eagle Guntherman and like these like ones that are seen and represented at the top of like this inner circle of ridiculous partisan people on this platform. And now all of them are doing it almost every day. How does that not show you an obvious desperation, right? So this point is not included in that, only that it's happening at the same time. Because I agree with what this is stating and where it's going. I still argue, though, nothing will happen. Ron Johnson drops the hammer at RFK Jr.'s Senate hearing. Now, in fact, I didn't even, for all we know, this is an old video. I mean, it's funny, this person even says you've had the data for 4 years, which I agree with, but that's not my point wasn't even about that. It's just that this stuff is out there, and it says they hid the myocarditis signal. That's what Johnson's saying. Agree. I believe this is an older video, which is what a lot of them do. And tell me if I'm wrong on that, by the way. They hid the stroke signal. They masked adverse events. Yes, we talked about all of this. We've proven all of this. I personally, extensively, was verifying this while it was happening. But there are a bunch of people involved in the cover-up who still work within HHS, CDC, FDA. Subpoenas are coming. But basically, Ron Johnson just lays out all the information, and RFK Jr. says, I have a promise to look into it. Right? Okay. So if it's old, that makes the point for you, which would mean, why are you sharing old videos? But if it's not, which my point wasn't even looking into whether it was. My point is, let's just say for sake of conversation that this is happening right now. Do you think there's going to be subpoenas? Do you think whether there are subpoenas that people will actually go to jail? I don't know how anybody can honestly say yes to that right now. Not only has there not been a single, like zero arrests around any of these topics they've been pushing about, this one connects directly to Donald Trump. Directly to Donald Trump's administration. Both times, by the way, seeing as how they're still right now giving people COVID shots. So why would we think this is going to go anywhere? I hope it does. I really do. But if it does, then Donald Trump's name damn well better be on there too. And Biden and everybody else. But that's my point. I doubt that will happen. If you want to hold Fauci accountable, well, then Trump's responsible. He's the leader of the administration. So I doubt that will happen. I guess we'll wait and see. And on that same point, here is the Highwire sneak peek, new Polio doc series, a sneak peek, and this is from 2024, basically his breakdown of the lies around the polio situation, which you guys are well aware of. You watch their show, you've seen me talk about it 1,000 times. I mean, the most obvious current example is the oral polio vaccines that were given, which caused their own outbreak. And that becomes the scare of the old, that's something Bill Gates and the rest created with, and I mean, literally Bill, with his own picture of him putting those oral versions in the people's mouths in Congo and elsewhere. But as Jeffrey writes, because right now you got a lot of this, who knows if they just don't know, which I find hard to believe, or they're grifting, lying, trying to act like they care. As he says, Jeffrey Jackson from Highwire, it's frustrating, which I agree, to hear Tucker Carlson, Elon Musk, Donald Trump speak on vaccines and cite the historical study of polio as the one thing we know probably worked. Guys, he says respectfully, please educate yourselves further. Now, see, Jeffrey, even if you already think what I think right now, you know why people would say it that way, to be respectful. I'm tired of being respectful of people that I think are being dishonest deliberately. But either way, I get it. The point, though, is, do we really think that they just don't know? We must know as a fact that they do know, right? Tucker's interviewed most of you guys. The idea that we still say that needs to speak to the larger lie around the institution, or rather the power structure. Just recognize that. Here's another example, as you might have seen. I mean, you can have all this big talk about plenty of things, but then they literally put somebody in the position as the head of the CDC who has Rob Schneider called a vaccine mandating medical authoritarian. Good way to frame that. As the article calls her, the queen of mandating vaccines. As David Icke says, because everyone's like, I'm shocked. She's like, why are you shocked about that? It's what he's been doing so far. And David says, I'm shocked that anyone is shocked. Kennedy and Make America Healthy Again was always a get Trump elected scam. Now, I agree, but which I argue he would agree with as well, is that there's real people like us who actually believe Make America Healthy Again. And a lot of those are conservatives who now call this out because they were lied to. But the Make America Healthy Again movement from the government side was obviously a scam. Those two things I think are important to differentiate. And it says, was always a get Trump elected scam with a limited sell-by date once he was installed. We are talking about a self-styled father of the fake COVID vaccine. I mean, think of how crazy that is. And Mahai's yet more manipulated fakery that MAGA and its influencers, that's in my mind, the fake government side and the fake MAGA influencers, not the people that genuinely want to make America great again, whether we disagree on what that means, is yet more manipulated fakery that MAGA and its influencers like Ian Carroll big time fell for. Now, as he writes there, it seems to suggest that he thinks that Ian fell for it as opposed to as part of it, right? Which is what we should consider, because I think a lot of these people truly are being used and don't even realize it. At the very least, we should consider that. Consider that about me, about David, about anybody. Question everything. But guys, I mean, how many times can we keep falling for this if they just keep doing the same things? Narrative, same thing. Narrative, same thing. Eventually you start to go, well, I'll hear the narrative, but I expect the same thing. And that's not assumption, right? We're not betting. We're saying this is what I expect, and I'm waiting for the outcome. And right now, it's pretty easy to see. Now, I'll include the article we go over in 2025. Trump admin leans into self-amplifying mRNA vaccines as they told you they were stopping it. I'll even grab the community shot, which still somehow doesn't reach people that they literally have in August 27th, 2025, 2026, 2025, 2026, COVID-19 vaccine, mRNA community that they have given to people, despite what they put out. Or all of the self-amplifying versions that we now know are happening if you're paying attention and watch this show. Like the Arcturus COVID-19 self-amplifying shot, which is also still happening, as he made a point to say explicitly when they said they were ending them, that Arcturus and I think Amplitude Therapeutics were going to continue. And that's what they are. Talked about this many times. I'm sure all of you watching know this, and unfortunately those that need to hear it probably aren't here. But that's how this goes when you're censored. But what's interesting is you might have seen this, which again is a positive step. The Pentagon is dropping its flu vaccine requirement for service members effectively immediately. Peg says, as now, we'll have to wait and see what happens. As usual, the screaming supporters will go, the thing he said, we did it, it's over, we won a year ago. It's like, well, he just said it. Let's wait and see if it happens, bud, because they lie a lot, but that's, I'm making fun of him because that's what these guys do. They act all serious and high up, and they're some of the most juvenile and ignorant people in the conversation. And I'm just being real. It's not an attack. These people are demonstrating daily that they are blind following partisans that will jump at the next argument. I mean, he was just telling you that Massey effectively stopped the deep state by stopping FISA, which, by the way, they did anyway, which he didn't come back to talk about, as far as I could tell, without realizing that Trump and Johnson and the rest were the ones pushing that. So are they the deep state now? As we'll get into again, as I told you, Alex Jones is right back around to telling you Trump's fighting the deep state with the calling out the SPLC. Okay. Told you, but as I said here, and he says, we will not force you, but because your body, your faith, and your convictions are not negotiable. Well, they say a lot of big things. They said that too during Trump's last administration, and then they very much coerce them despite what you guys lie about. But my point, just to carry over from what we talked about, right? They're dropping it immediately, the flu vaccination requirement, because I said it's in your food now. Thank you for your attention on this matter. I'm kind of joking, right? And I said all kind of jokes aside, this is very positive step if it actually happens and it's actually upheld. Because what happens when the next administration comes in and they just turn it back the other way? You can forever argue that means Republicans are the good guys, or you could just realize that both sides of your false two-party illusion recognize they can do that and maintain the thing they want. Of course, I could be wrong, but you should at least consider that, as an intelligent person would. But the food point is very real. We've had Tennessee legislation come through, then people literally standing up to stop it from happening. Transgenic vaccines are a very real problem. And here's shown self-defense. 2023, vaccines grown in lettuce. Representative Thomas Massey asked House to bar FDA, USDA from funding transgenic edible vaccines, which they did not do. All right, so ask yourself, is that the kind of thing you'd expect? If it was Biden in the administration, would you then wonder whether that was the case? You should, and you should ask it either way. Now, my big point is how many times these people can yell things that just literally don't happen before you start waiting to see them actually do, which you should do anyway, no matter who you're talking about. People yell things all the time, and they mean them half the time, and they still don't happen. Wait for the outcome. Don't be a Nick's order, ladies and gentlemen. Now, here's Pete Hegseth's point, and Aaron Siri points this out and says, good news, right? Too bad Trump's pick to head the CDC does not understand liberty and the First Amendment rights. Okay, we just saw who they put there, so maybe that changes because she'll do it her own way. See, it's counterintuitive. Now, we'll wait and see what happens. We should. And if it continues and they genuinely stop this, that is an unequivocally positive thing. Of course, if it's not somehow otherwise being snuck in their food or water, which I don't think is that crazy to consider, because they've done that many times in the past with military guys. But it's important, just, if it does stop, I think the good thing, no matter what, is that it's not forced on anybody, military, individual or not. That is an important thing. And I'll say that's a positive step from whoever does it, and I'll praise them for it forever if it actually stays through. Doesn't mean I'm going to ignore all the other wrong and illegal and, disgusting things they're doing or either side of it. Now, just quickly on the deflection in general, right? I mean, that's what I was saying. This is recent. This is from 2022. And I'm actually kind of surprised that from people like this, Gunther Eagleman, not that I respect this person, he's ridiculous, but almost 2 million followers. And like every other one of these people, I could literally do a show for an hour showing you nonstop examples of basically everybody, and then Elon Musk sharing it, and Donald Trump putting it on Truth Social, which means this is a coordinated effort to convince you that they're on your side when they're not doing anything. Obama exposed, he writes. Gunther Eagleman. President Trump posted this last night. Yeah, he did. This old video of Trump, I guess, weirdly cut off with the top Obama thing, which I think they started doing because it changes the way the algorithm treats their propaganda. It's just very weird. They all do it now. It's just hilarious. It is an old video talking about what, Gabbard and all the rest. And yeah, nothing's happened. No one's done anything. That's what an honest person will be saying. Why haven't you arrested him yet? Instead of going, the thing. I'm just exclaiming the thing we knew from a year ago today for no reason. Insanely embarrassing, but they're all doing it. All of them. And I said, anyone keep a count? They each do this daily. And this platform forces it into your feed. Hashtag arrest someone. Anyone. Obama should be in jail. Another one of these accounts, you've said, point to many of them. Breaking, Tulsi Gabbard is doubling down on what she released again today. Oh, really? Well, guess what? That video is from 2025. And there's many of them they use, and most of them are 2025. Some of there's new ones they started to use because Cash went on that show, but it's the same argument. She doubled down again today in that video from 2025. Here's the link. You can watch for yourself. That's the same video.
The production.
Same one. Look at that. 2025. I know most of you know this. It's probably not even important to keep focusing on. There's something more than just propaganda here. Like, this is a coordinated thing, which I find interesting. Tim Kramer, 400,000 followers, 200,000 followers, or 40, excuse me. And he simply does the same thing. Do you understand what's happening here? Friday, Tulsi took to the podium claiming treason taken. No, that's old. Didn't happen, right? That's old. Same old thing. And this is new, though. This Maria one is new, right? And it simply says, Sunday, Cash claimed. Now, I mean, who knows? Maybe she stood up and said it again. If she did, that's more crazy than ever because they're not doing anything. My point is, all they're pointing to is old information. Monday, Tulsi stated clearly that names and positions of those involved in the coup against Trump. So you're going to tell me that you guys can prove that they literally illegally couped the government and you're just going to do nothing? Like, you're telling me you're going to wait it out a little bit? What wouldn't they right now be trying to so let's just say they're literally, conducting a coup, or they had. That means they wouldn't stop short of literally using force and military to just remove you and take over. But yeah, let's let it simmer for a while and make sure we got. It's just stupid, guys. And look, I hope they get arrested. If they do tomorrow, then I'll talk about it. But it still wouldn't change how continually they've done nothing about this. And then once it happens, maybe I'll look into it and we'll find out here's why they waited. And I'll tell you that. And it would still be the correct way to look at this because we don't have any information other than they keep yelling about it. Nothing happens. Pelosi, Obama, Klaus Schwab, Bill Gates, everybody. You go down the list of all the things they tell you are going to come. Here's another one, Awakening Outlaw. That was the one, 336,000 followers. And this one's about his birth certificate. The reason the story never went away is mainly because Obama himself, he literally owned, just basically the point about this. This is Trump from 2012. Extremely credible sources called my office and told me that his birth certificate's a fraud. Sure, maybe. Who can? I mean, do something about it then. I mean, at this point, I'm not even trying to get into whether it's true. You keep hyping something. Funny how nothing ever seems to happen, but they all keep doing it. Instead of going, how come you never did something from 2012, Donald Trump? Well, let's also celebrate the 60-week anniversary of the most transparent administration in history, right? Make fun of every single one of these people, guys. Every single one of these. DC Drano, Libs of TikTok. These are the people who stood there and pretended like they were going to break this Epstein story and then gaslit you in any direction Trump leaned. And acting now like it's all over. How dumb. Jack Posobiec. What? Mike Cernovich. Everyone. It's just sad, guys. And you know it. You're not stupid. You know it. Anyone otherwise trying to convince you otherwise? If someone's trying to tell you to ignore the information for the team, all of them, they are the enemy in a real sense, not left or right, but somebody trying to convince you to work against your own interests. They are your enemy. Now, here's an example. This is another one of these accounts I've been seeing scream about everything anyone says. This is, what's her name? I forget her name. Going around reading statements from Kamala Harris about why we should attack Iran. Well, guess what? We're like, yep, exactly. You're all the same, right? Watch this liberal Karen's brain malfunction when she learns the quotes threatening to take out Iran are from Hillary and Kamala. I said, okay. What this blind partisan team sport player focuses his energy on while he focuses energy on dunking on the libs, he seems to embarrassingly be oblivious to what this clip actually demonstrates, which I'm sure you've already picked up on, that both parties are just as corrupt and dishonest, and both will sell you out for Israel's war. But yeah, you got her, man. Yeah, she's a stupid lib. And you're all fighting for the same problem. I mean, think about how insane this is, that person looks at that and goes, oh, I'm going to go make fun of that woman, instead of going, whoa, so they're all the same and I'm fighting for the same? Yeah, these are dishonest or stupid people. I'm sorry. That's just the reality of this, guys. You can't you have to stand back and recognize if they were both going to go to war with Iran, then they're both the problem. As opposed to making fun of the person who thought only one was. You're both doing the same thing, in effect. And yet they can't even reflect on that. How entertainingly stupid. Now, this is just perfectly entertainingly stupid. I actually can't believe this. This is real. I even downloaded the video in case they changed it, which I'm surprised they did not. They literally misspelled the word secretary. Riley Podleski, or whoever this new stand-in person is for whatever they want you to think they're doing. They misspelled secretary, guys. It's not a joke. It's real. They literally misspelled the word. How is that possible? Like, we're talking about, people make mistakes, right? But this is the government. You're talking about people who have checks and teams and verify and propaganda. So either that was deliberate for some weird propaganda reason, or these people are the most incompetent group of ridiculous politicians I've ever seen in my life. And I think that's the case, even if they are using this for propaganda. It's wild to me. Absolutely embarrassing. Incompetence and buffoonery. Now, as I said, Alex would inevitably go back to saying Trump is the guy and fight for Trump, but, bad guy, but, other badder, whatever their ridiculous logic is. For the first time ever, he says, Trump attacked the heart of the deep state. Yeah, the same deep state that he was just a part of 30 seconds ago, the same globalist that the idea that you can go from saying that he was occupied by a foreign government, that's not a small statement that you then just brush away and go, now he's fighting the deep state. He's occupied. That means he didn't get to choose not to be based on his argument. He said that himself, or that he has shown his true colors, as I said. I wrote it right there. So he sold out is the words he used. Showed his true colors, but now he's fighting the deep state again? It's just, you got to call this stuff out, guys. One, because this person has a larger audience than most mainstream platforms, and he is lying to people. That's important. Like, it's important to call out Fox and CNN lying to most people. It's insane to me. Or if he doesn't realize it, look at what we just went through. What about those big things that were supposed to happen that never did? Pay attention, guys. This is just painful to watch. And people, like I told you, is going to go back to supporting him like the rest of them are. And it's hard to watch, but it's clear. It's also clear, like he told you, Palantir was some small thing you should ignore. Remember that? Here we are. Jason Bassler, 27 government agencies and counting. When a Palantir exec turned whistleblower tells us the company intends on taking over the U.S. government. Maybe we should believe them. Now, interestingly enough, someone down here says, is this post correct that Palantir has contracts with at least 27 government agencies? Grok says, yep, post is correct. Palantir has active contracts or data platforms deployed across dozens of U.S. government agencies and components as of April 2026, including DoD, Army, Air Force, Marines, SOCOM, DHS, recent $1 billion AI deal, ICE, IRS, NASA, USDA, FBI, CIA, the Border Patrol, FFA, or I always do that, FAA, even though I know the actual word, for some reason my mind does that. I mean, that's not even all of them. Think about that. I mean, this is unprecedented as far as I'm concerned. This is one company that seems to be at least influencing, if not controlling, and you should ask that, every single element, not just military, not just police force, IRS, USDA. I mean, that's insane. And this is not just like an AI data thing. They're a military platform. They're working with the genocide in Israel. I just don't, it's amazing to me what can get pushed aside. I mean, and we talked about this extensively in 2024 and well before that. Derek and Whitney in particular, well before that. This is this article from 2025. Welcome to the Palantir world order. Remember, again, this is why we were called black-pilled by people like Alex Jones. It's a purity test, they said, when we were screaming about this in 2024. Exactly where we are. And I'm not being hyperbolic. Go look for yourself. And here is Javier Milei, the libertarian saving the world who is sat down with Peter Thiel, just like every other shifting network state government they're rolling into the world. And, look, maybe you don't think Thiel's a bad guy. Fine. Just recognize that what this represents is that kind of corporate globalist transition, in my opinion. A guy who's supposed to be, fiscally sound, saving the world, and just literally drives his country to the ground. And all these people don't want to talk about that. Because it was never really that. Like Peter Thiel, they're not libertarians, guys. This is a scam. Please check this out. This is one of many different discussions we've had. This one entitled The Network State Coup and the Engineered Transition to what they literally call tech Zionism. Srini Vasan, former CTO of Coinbase, himself wrote in his book about this and called it tech Zionism. This just can't get more alarming than that, in my opinion. Now, in regard to Palantir as well, and this weird push from Melania about like tracking and the children overlap. She came out and is hosting the First Lady's luncheon in DC. This was on the 23rd, at least was posted then, where she bragged about empowering American children by partnering with Palantir, OpenAI, and others to usher kids into an AI surveillance state takeover using the education system to do it. Now, that's obviously his framing, but this is, imagine, okay, if this was Biden talking about Palantir and AI and children, I don't even need to finish the sentence. It's amazing what people can pretend is okay. And as Jason points out, it's immersed everywhere. I mean, this is just one example. DHS using now funding AI smart glasses that record, show a data display, and scans faces gait to match biometric database. Of course, unless we're talking about January 6th and the whole Capitol Police part, because then they suddenly don't care about the gait and all the information. But watch lists of illegal immigrants on the street in real time. First immigrants, then protesters, then you. Now, we're already there, by the way. That's already happening. Welcome to the future we warned about. Exactly. Now, talking about Kash Patel for a brief moment, because this is still part of this kind of manipulation we're dealing with right now. There's something very weird going on around all of this. And I think, and one is just to make sure you saw this because it's pretty spectacularly embarrassing, but also that this feels like another effort, and possibly an effort to use Kash's own embarrassingness, being embarrassing, to deflect. Now, who's to say if that's something that would happen? I very much think Trump would do that. The question is, would he be a willing participant? Either way, whether he knows it or not, that's how I kind of feel like this is playing out. Now, Kash's FBI false flag was a conversation we had in 2025. This was in November. And they talked about his many, by the way, look, funny how many things that we're even correct about, theorizing about, that we never even followed back up on, but these many different examples of his weird investigations. I mean, even from the Halloween point, if you look at how that ended up, the point was they hyped so much stuff and it ended up being minimal charges for specific people that weren't even the big group or the Antifa FBI conversation. They lied. They made this entire story about some internal what about the entire Antifa story? I mean, just recognize, guys, that you can prove these things for yourself simply by lack of action at this point, or all the other evidence that we showed you. But this was just to show you this was something he's been floundering in this position. It's coming out everywhere. I'm sure you can pay attention, whether it's that recent article or not. I think this guy's objectively incompetent in this position, and his own people have said that. But we also talked about that recent article in the Atlantic titled "Cash Spins Out," and of course, this was about the argument that he went to the console and thought he was locked out and kind of freaked out. And I realized there was like 9 people that testified to that to the Atlantic. Now, they could be lying about that. That's possible, right? We should question, especially corporate media. But it also lines up with what we see from Cash, but we shouldn't assume. We should question all of it. Very well, they could be lying about Cash. But, you have to think about this in the context. In my mind, from a nonpartisan, what's the interest of that? And you may go, they want to attack him. Okay, if we're just talking about Democrats just using platforms to go after, guys, they could bury them right now. Thousands of things. Just the same thing in reverse, by the way. When Biden was there, if they really wanted to truly go after him, they would have. They like to give you adversarial media, but they don't really go after each other, like we can see by the 0 arrests. Anyway, the point is he clearly had an issue. People spoke about that. He denied it. But what's followed up is interesting. Now, I'm wondering whether or not his recent kind of thing and what he's doing with the lawsuit, which seems to already be failing, is just to keep you distracted elsewhere. Here's what the Huffington Post article says. Kash Patel seems to blatantly contradict his own Atlantic lawsuit claim. The Atlantic claimed in its reporting, actually here, let's watch this first, and we'll come back to it.
Explain the computer login issue. Just explain the computer login issue. You were not able to log into your lawsuit contends that you were not able to log into the system. What did you think after you were unable to log into the system?
Now, just to be clear, his own lawsuit said that. Now, his lawsuit does challenge the idea that he thought he was fired. But of course, we're talking about a subjective internal, his opinion in his mind and what he thought. I always laugh at how dumb this stuff gets when it gets into that kind of idea. He felt this way. His intentions were this, but he did clearly acknowledge that there was a tech issue, right? So it's funny that this guy basically says exactly what the thing says, that you were locked out, not claiming you thought you were fired. And he asked that and he just freaks out and calls him a liar. But what he said was in his lawsuit. So it shows defensiveness. It shows, I think, dishonesty.
Have a survey. How many of you people believe that's true?
Just explain the computer login issue. You were not able to log into your lawsuit contends that you were not able to log into the system. What did you think after you were unable to log into the system?
Let's have a survey. How many of you people believe that's true? Hang on.
Did you communicate?
You asked the question. Let me answer it.
No. Did you communicate with anyone that you thought you were fired after you were unable to log into?
The problem with you and your report. Don't cut me off. You asked the question.
Straightforward question.
The problem with you and your baseless reporting is that is an absolute lie.
Nope.
It was never said. It never happened.
Now, see, what he's trying to respond to is that he was fired and freaked out. The guy asked a very basic question. And look, I hate all the media people in this room are ridiculous. Most of them are dishonest and partisan. It doesn't change the fact that whoever verbalized that, it's accurate. I'll show you right now. Now, it's clear what he does challenge is that he thought he was fired and that he went and freaked out and everybody. But it says very clearly that there was an issue with logging in. So why would he do that? Now, the question I'm asking, is it just to cause some kind of a ruckus and deflect and cause clips to spin out or me to talk about? Maybe. Either way, though, it does show a level of incredible dishonesty and incompetence, which very clearly makes a difference with all of these different conversations that they're involved in.
And I will serve in this administration as long as the president and the attorney general want me to do so. And every time you guys report false lies, every time you guys raise baseless questions, when we are here to talk about the Southern Poverty Law Center's
which we'll get to in a second,
$3 million decade-long scheme.
Indictment, meaning it's an allegation, which he says later, but you got to love how fast and loose they get when they're speaking off the cuff. It's not a verified fact at this point. It's an indictment.
To fraudulently fleece Americans. You are off topic.
It's a simple, straightforward question. Did you talk to anybody about whether you thought you
The
were fired?
simple answer to your question is you are lying. And
You hear his voice even? Like it's hard to watch this guy, and I'm not trying to nitpick. And there's a reason that Blanche is getting irritated and impatient because Kash is wildly fumbling this.
every time you do so, I've answered your question. It's simply as follows. I was never locked out of my systems. Anybody who says it,
lawsuit says the opposite. Your lawsuit contends
Anyone that says the
your lawsuit-
opposite is lying.
The
Thank
lawsuit
you.
that you filed.
It reminds me of like, the Bondi and Nome kind of stuff, which was embarrassing. Who knows why they thought that would work? They both basically got removed, but they just grandstand and laugh and disregard and and they just look like children. They look like petulant children. I don't know why they thought that would make them look strong, but that's clearly they're trying to emulate the Trump tactic, which I also think is ridiculous and obvious. He just has a much more loyal base.
Says that directly.
Man, stop. You're being extraordinarily rude. And
Oh, sorry for being rude, Blanche. I thought this was about journalism and asking questions to an adversarial government. Sorry about that. I was supposed to be polite to you while you break the law. It's just that's what they're creating. They're trying to create access to what's already there, by the way, but they want that continual dynamic. They want the access journalism, right? You got to ask it the way we want it, or we're not going to allow you in. That's not journalism, right? Remember how this whole thing they tried to placate us with the new media in the room, and did that just stop happening? Then who cares, right? It wasn't real.
I know maybe that's part of your profession, but please just stop. If you ask a question, he can answer it. And then
And you can ask more questions, bud, because that's how it works. That's the reality. You can kick us out, sure, which they've happened very few and far between because these people have a job and they care more about their job than they do about the truth, my opinion.
wait, now you're interrupting me. Like just a little bit of respect, man. Just a tiny little bit. Try it sometime.
Oh, try. He's such a snide, disrespectful person while he says that, right? But what's funny to me, what are you talking about when you say respect? You are a government that has been like intentionally deceiving people in lashing out at media. The most childish, selfish, attacking people for doing things that are within their job description. And then you attack somebody for simply doing, whether you like those people or not. Like, I'm trying to highlight that what they do right there is to change the way younger people in the field come up into it, thinking like, okay, well, I'm not supposed to be like that. It's just sad, but I don't think it's working. I still believe that. I don't believe that this is that people are falling for most of what's happening right now. Now, okay, back to this point. That's what happened first. Now it says the Atlantic claimed in its reporting that Patel panicked frantically and engaged in a freak out, believing that he had been fired when he couldn't log into the FBI system. While the lawsuit refuted the claim that he freaked out. On April 10th, 2026, Patel, quote, had a routine technical problem logging into a government system, which was quickly fixed. Okay. So the guy said, when you had that login issue, what did you think? You're a liar. It's just because he was so ready to push back on what he sees them as, which in many cases they are, right? But instead of coming out and being like, I'm trying to think of a way to ask it in a kind of juvenile way, like I'm sure he sees all of them, even though he's the same way, in many ways projects onto them what he is. And they didn't. They asked a very basic question and he was ready to lash out. That's how I read that situation. And that's sad, guys. That's sad. That's embarrassing. It says, while the lawsuit refuted the claim that I already said, it says had a technical routine logging an issue. It says in his lawsuit filed on Monday, Patel denied the validity of the rest of the Atlantic reporting, which we'll find out, I guess, which detailed instances of excessive drinking and unexplained absences. There's been people that spoke up, but the point is, I honestly don't even care, honestly. There's a degree which it matters. Like I said before, though, the drinking for me is not the issue. It's whether or not he does his job, regardless of whether that's happening. And if you argue that he's not doing his job, which is self-evident, then that's the case to be made. These people are all abusing something, in my opinion. But it says in a statement on Monday, the Atlantic described Patel's lawsuit as meritless. And it says, we stand by our reporting on Kash Patel and will vigorously defend the Atlantic and our journalist against this meritless lawsuit. Now, look, you could argue they would say that if they were just wanting to hold their lie, but that's not what I would expect. Like if they were just wanting this to go away because they realized they would redact it, they'd get quiet. For them to stand up and scream this and stand by what they're doing tells me that they think they're right. We'll find out. As it stands right now, it seems that's what the evidence that I can see seems to be flimsy at best. But again, it's all pretty much up in the air. I can't believe he actually filed the lawsuit, which is what he said anyway. I'm waiting to see more information because that means you have discovery and things will come out. And I think he's going to look very stupid. Now, Patel is seeking $250 million in damages. I think they thought this would scare them. We'll find out. Now, the bigger point was this just something used to pull away from everything else? Well, you should ask that. But this one, I find to be far more likely. And honestly, this is a very large manipulation that is still ongoing that I think was almost used. I don't know what the right word would be, like without authorization or something, like by this administration to try to use this to deflect against something and blame it on the Democrats when this is a bigger than U.S. alone agenda. But either way, I think it's about trying to pit this on one side while no accountability will ever be coming, in order to make you, one, ignore all that's happening, but then somehow think that, well, it's all one big Democrat trick, which works for them for whatever they want to use next. Which, yeah, there are half of that is correct, right? There are plenty of Democrat, but it's not about tricking all the Republicans. It's about tricking all of us. It's about using left-right paradigm manipulations to keep us attacking each other while the government carries on with all of its unilateral, one-focused war, Israel, whatever the larger agendas we're talking about. Now he says the money doesn't lie. The evidence shows the charity who supposedly fought the Klan funded the Klan. The charity who supposedly fought neo-Nazis funded neo-Nazis. Now, you can think about this from the sense of the government. Yes, very obviously, not all-encompassing. There's examples where that's not the case. But what you really, I hope, can recognize already is this very clear tactic is exactly what Israel does all around the world. Now, let's just, even for sake of conversation, other than the obvious Israel-Ukraine connection, just keep that off the, just not include that right now, which I'll bring it up where it's relevant. But just because it's not even important to use that to make this clear in regard to how the U.S. is manipulating it. But don't forget that connection, the Israel-Azov movement connection, the larger manipulation of all of it. But my point is, and from just a Zionism perspective, using racism manipulatively for the benefit of the ideological agenda is like their bread and butter. So he says the Southern Poverty Law Center engaged in a massive fraud operation to deceive their donors, funded the very hate groups they claim to oppose, and then hid their operations from public through shell companies and fake entities, which by and large, I very much, and I've proven to you that's happened in many cases over the years on both sides of our paradigm, many different administrations. The point, though, is something going to happen about it? Are they going to do anything about it? And if you look at the idea of the lawsuit itself, or rather, the investigation itself, hid their operations, right? The indictment, rather, is where it's at right now. If there's not enough to go on, and it's basically like every other thing they've cobbled together, James Comey, Letitia James, both of those people should be in jail. They weren't and are not because of their either incompetence or deliberate action. It's obvious. And you can make the same point about pretty much everything they're claiming to go after. Epstein files, anything. So let's get into this a bit. Now, remember, like I said before, this is just somebody's thought I want to include that I feel differently, but I'll say it in a second. This is something that I've gone in depth on for, you tell me in the chat, how many times? In so many times over the years where it pops up into a new discussion, many times over the years, just like direct conversation about this one topic. So my point is that I'm not going to go, I could do a 2-hour show going through every detail that would be important. And maybe we will if this gets bigger. But right now, it's all there. We've done this many times. And I think the main point I'm making is just about understanding that the government itself is using this against all sides, and that this is all of government manipulation in order to keep us fighting ourselves. Now, as Melanie says, consider her opinion. This is BBC, U.S. charges anti-extremism group over payments to informants in hate groups. Now, ultimately, that is what the argument is. Informants, right? Just like the FBI. Well, the same way I would argue about the FBI, well, what changes that? Where's the line between informant and working with them? Or rather, they're supporting what they're doing. You could point to Larry Nassar, right, in the Olympic gymnast guy, who I could not believe when I was reporting that story. I think it was over a year. I don't want to misquote it, but a long period of time where they allowed him to continue molesting children, because they claimed they were getting information and they were going to investigate. And, how can you possibly rationalize something like that? Anyway, the point is that the informant part of it is that what they're claiming is what the SPLC was arguing is they were funding informants to get information to expose these groups. Now, I disagree in a larger sense with how it's utilized, but maybe individuals believe that, and you should ask that, whatever your opinion, because that's objective. Maybe that is how they saw it. Maybe that's the reality. And maybe this is being misrepresented by one side of the paradigm in order to convince you that it was only the other side, when in reality it was all of it, and that's a way to couch it and never actually do anything about it. But what she says is, to be clear, Trump's FBI is going after the Southern Poverty Law Center because they infiltrated and exposed the same dangerous right-wing extremist groups that many Trump allies are associated with. Now, I think it's much broader than that. But what's interesting is you can verifiably, as I've shown over the years, prove that many people in his inner circle, or rather kind of abstract, but some in the inner circle, but more people connected to Trump's momentum. And you know, and again, some people that you can tie directly to higher level government positions are tied back to the, Robert Rundos and Matthew Heimbachs and these different groups that are connected to the Azov movement, the Rise Above movement, neo-Nazism in this country. And the Charlottesville point we've made 1,000 times. So that doesn't mean that it's Trump, though. Maybe just because people around him are, right, be objective about it. But what I'm putting this for is to consider this. Just consider the point that it may well be an effort to deflect from something that they're more absorbed in. It's just being objective to ask that question. Or that it's an all Democrat lie to trap the Republicans, which I do think is a part of the story, but it's not only Democrats. Like we talked about on January 6th, that was an effort to manipulate I guess anyone watching to think Republicans were the problem. But it would be wrong of you, in my mind, incorrect, to think that was only Democrats doing that. It was your government doing that, all of it. And this could be hard for some people to put their mind around. And BX says the people that the SPLC, Southern Poverty Law Center, paid were not researchers trying to do the right thing. They paid lifelong, genuine white supremacists who were getting kickbacks for info. Now, technically, that's basically another way to frame informants, and which is why I largely disagree with the way that they utilize these things, because what's the difference there at some point, right? And so I agree with BX. I think that's more close to the reality. But this person goes, so informants, right? So it's an interesting situation where you could choose to frame it a certain way, right? When, if you really understand what I'm talking about, this is something that needs to be framed as your government utilizing, paying, infiltrating groups to use them for their purposes against the American people. If you look at it that way, you will not be able to see it the way they're trying to frame it, because there's far too much evidence that broadens this out well beyond one side. So here's the actual first indictment. What I really want to stress, by the way, and I'll just start with this because it's funny to me. I went over this in the last, which one was that? I think it was even the Antifa one, where everyone's like, we did it, it's over, we got them, they're going down. And I said, guys, that's an indictment. That's an allegation. Yes, based on evidence, but it's not definitive. And as it says, an indictment is a formal written accusation issued by a grand jury, which is presented evidence. But again, it's very easy to, especially politically motivated, drive these things to accept things that they're simply well put together arguments. It should be more than that, but this is how it works. But evidence, but not proof. And it says, issued by a grand jury that charges a person with a serious crime, charges them. It serves as a procedural step to determine if there is probable cause to believe the accused committed the crime. So then you could move to trial. I mean, you're talking about 2 steps effectively away from actually going to the location you will go to find out whether they're guilty. Now, my mind is, again, I think it's very obvious that it's not just Southern Poverty Law Center, guys. This is a government manipulation through many different things that are tied back to, things like the ADL, which we'll get into. That's a huge part of this. But you have to understand that this is not there yet. And you've got everybody in this conversation, all the corporate mainstream alternative manipulators screaming, this is it. We did it. We called them out. We knew it. They did it the whole time. And then they go on to show the Patriot Front, which, by the way, is not even cited in this indictment. You have to ask whether this is intentional stupidity, to muddy the waters, or these people are just this ridiculous. We'll get into that too. Because look, the Patriot Front, we've talked about as well, which is why I'm trying to show you more of a broad picture. But you can look for yourself and find out that nowhere in their indictment or the evidence they're presenting does it even come close to connecting to the Patriot Front outside of connecting to people who overlap between certain groups. But weirdly enough, almost as the entirety of the Twitter conversation was Patriot Front, Patriot Front. And it makes you wonder whether this is like what I'm talking about, designed to not be able to go anywhere. It's just fascinating how often this happens. Now, April 21. A grand jury in Alabama today returned an indictment charging the Southern Poverty Law Center with 11 counts of wire fraud, false statements to a federally insured bank, and conspiracy to commit concealment money laundering. Now, that is a far cry from what is being framed online. They funded right-wing terrorism and all these different things. There's a connection there. But you realize this is the same thing they keep doing with what, they're charging Garcia. He's a terrorist, monster, womanizer, blah, blah, blah. And you read the statement, it's traffic ticket. Whatever it was before, I'm making a point. That's not what it said. But it's something that's that ridiculous. Wait a minute. Well, all these other claims you're making, it's not even what it says right there, but that doesn't change the conversation. It doesn't even change the U.S. government personnel from standing there and saying them themselves. So we're talking about wire fraud, which could mean any number of things, false statements to a bank, and concealment, conspiracy to commit concealment, money laundering. Right? So that's interesting. Like that seems like this is not a terror, anyway, you get the point. And I find that to be very dishonest, like a lot of things being done, but I care about this either way. I'm just trying to highlight the partisan use of something, which will, I think, guarantee nothing happens. Now it says the SPLC is manufacturing racism to justify its existence. Yes, like I said, who does that remind you of? Everything we're talking about around Zionism, the ADL, Israel, it's literally what they do. Manufacturing racism. I mean, look at what our current administration is doing. The current administration screaming about racism and anti-Semitism. Trump has been pushing that the entire time, more than Biden, by the way. And is that what's happening? It's not even the data backs that up. The point is to manufacture that based on you like Palestine, you're a racist who hate Jews. And that becomes the justification for why Zionism must exist. This is the same ploy. And of course, Todd Blanche was saying this, using donor money to allegedly, because it's not verified yet, profit off Klansmen cannot go unchecked. This, because he said allegedly, just to make that clear. This Department of Justice will hold the SPLC and every other fraudulent organization operating with the same deceptive playbook accountable. No entity is above the law. Yeah, except this one and that one in Israel, every other group we ever worked with, and all the people next to me, and all the people Trump pardoned, all the grifters that you pardoned, they got arrested again, and then pardoned, but except all of that, except Bukele, and except, it's just like, what a joke, right? It's just nobody in the world believes this. Not even their supporters believe this because they know they're people that they don't want to be held accountable. So not even they believe it. So it's just kind of sad. It goes on to say the SPLC allegedly engaged in a massive fraud operation to deceive their donors, enrich themselves, and hide their deceptive operations from the public. Well, this just might as well be a description of the government. Might as well be a description of every think tank and public USAID and an NED. It's just literally every single one we're talking about. And what's funny is I'm pretty sure most of you agree with that, even Republicans. So when you think about that again, fraud to deceive their donors, like every government organization I've ever heard of, enrich themselves, like every government I've ever heard of, and hide their deceptive operation from the public, like every criminal and government I've heard of. Well, it sounds like you're just basically calling them out for everything you guys are doing. But I agree they should be accused of these things. The FBI Director Kash Patel said this. They lied to their donors, vowing to dismantle violent extremist groups, and actually turned around and paid the leaders of these very extremist groups, even utilizing these funds to have these groups facilitate the commission of state and federal crimes. Yeah, agent provocateur, government action. But again, back to the Israel overlap to this is literally something that they have, I don't want to say perfected because it's sometimes very clumsy, but it's something they do as a matter of policy. I mean, it's what they're, thou shalt make war through deception or whatever the actual, whatever the, not tagline, but the statement from Assad. That's what they're, tagline. That's what it is. And maybe I'll play that in a minute. But the point, turned around and paid the very leaders of these groups to do those things. Now, I'm going to get to an example of one of the most obvious from Skokie in Chicago, an example of it being caught as basically the ADL faking a Nazi march. Not even basically, literally what happened. And so it's important to think about that with the context of today. Now, maybe they're not even connected. Maybe it's just the U.S. government doing this. Maybe it is just the left doing this to make the right look bad. That's a possibility. But with all that we can see and everything we're getting to next, I think it's pretty obvious there's more to the story. And it says that is illegal, and this is an ongoing investigation. Yeah. So funny as it's ongoing that you guys all scream about how they're all criminals, as usual. Now, Unite the Right is what I'm going to focus on, but there's a lot of other angles we can get into. American Front, even the National Socialist Movement, there's overlaps to this that go, this one's just the American Nazi Party, Ku Klux Klan, right? But the point is specifically about the Charlottesville overlap. Just to make the one point. And then that rightly should make you then ask whether there's more to this story than one side doing this against the other, when you can recognize that it has been all of it. And it says a conviction will result in the forfeiture of financial gains from the alleged illegal activities. Right. So if and when that this will be the consequence, and we're not there yet. Here's what Breitbart just cites. It's funny. It's a very short article that just basically cites what Caroline Leavitt said. and it says, yeah, I saw the indictment yesterday, and I think that's a story that should be on every front page of every newspaper in the country because they've obviously been duping their supporters. Oh, is it obvious since we haven't concluded that and haven't been found guilty yet? Is it obvious that they didn't do the thing? Think about how irresponsible this is. Just like with Garcia and all the rest, even though that never actually happened. He was released. But you know what? He's a human trafficker, terrorist, monster, MS-13. No one ever holds them accountable for their vicious lies about people, which are crimes. That's libel, right? That's there's another term for it too. So what she's saying about an indictment that has yet to come to conclusion, so there's nobody held accountable, nobody even found guilty. They're obviously been duping their supporters and the American taxpayer for far too long. You mean the government? I would agree. It's a criminal organization, clearly. See, here we go. Now you're going into this level, which they always do, which goes from committing crimes, maybe even large crimes, to a criminal organization, which opens the door to terrorism, right? What is it? And I'm blanking on the term. Whatever, write me in the chat, to open a door into a federal investigation, right? You can this is what that does. It's just clearly, and that's not our DOJ saying that or Todd Blanche saying that. That's the grand jury indictment saying, no, it's not. That's your indictment saying that the grand jury allowed because there's enough evidence to support the idea that it may be possible. So she is either stupid or misrepresenting this to make you think the jury found it. The jury decided they're guilty. That's what they're doing. Just sad where we are, man. I mean that. Like, it's sad today. Like how many stupid things I'm seeing and how many people seem to fall for it. Now, this getting into the Southern Poverty Law Center point, he says allegedly helped fund, even he said allegedly in this post directly from the account, and facilitate the 2017 Charlottesville rally. That resulted in a young woman's life lost and then used shell companies to hide it from public and their donors. Okay, let's talk about that. Here's what Todd Blanche had to say in this conversation. Again, isn't it funny that you can stage the writing, Nick's order, about the Charlottesville rally, the thing that we've been screaming about, or Alex Rubinstein and plenty of other people that have been yelling about this for a long time, that they never really got into. In fact, these people largely defended that because they thought it was an attack on their side. And now suddenly you get the argument to go fake, where's fake? And they all jump on it, even though we've been proving that forever. The only reason these fair weather liars are jumping on this story is because it's useful for them. If you cared about the facts, this has been out there the entire time. But here's what Todd Blanche said. And the way the interview goes, it's only part of it, but it's very clear. This was, now what about the Charlottesville thing, Todd? Charlottesville. That's the important part. What? It just feels very, very coordinated.
Charlottesville and the Charlottesville Unite the Right rally. Were they involved in that?
Yes. So what we allege in the indictment and what the grand jury found is that one of the individuals that they paid was one of the folks who helped organize that terrible event. And so so imagine what we're talking about, Laura. We're talking about an organization that actively came out and just screamed it from the top of their lungs.
Yeah, and I believe that's Robert Rundo. I'm not sure because I've yet to see this go. I need more information. There's a few people. One of them got one, I forget off the top of my head, the one main guy that gets like framed, I don't mean framed as in misrepresented, but he's the one that puts forward as like the main organizer. I honestly think he's more of the kind of used element, but the Robert Rundo, these people could tie back to other elements that tie directly back to the larger sort of CIA apparatus of false or the, let's just say intelligence, because ADL, I think, in Israel connects into this apparatus of faking these very things for many reasons. Not just about pitting the left against the right or using it to divide ourselves. It's used to suppress your gun rights. It's used to suppress your free speech. I mean, it's like any other event, whether organic or not, it's used in that same way.
That actively came out and just screamed it from the top of their lungs.
So just so people understand watching this, did these informants in some cases, given the evidence you've seen, actually initiate what would ultimately be these activities? And obviously Charlottesville ended with a tragedy.
Now, here's what's interesting. Right. I'm surprised she actually said informants, because what that then opens the door to is it's not everyone there is fake, staged, which is what they're all ridiculously doing. What it means is there'd be informants like any other group we talk about, which get manipulated. And then there are people there that believe what they're doing. Like every other conversation we have, right? Like, think about that for a second. And so what she's actually saying, admitting, is that, well, that these are elements within that. that everybody else there was there to support the Unite the Right rally from the right wing or whatever, or the racist side or whatever you're talking about, whatever you're framing it as. That is the majority, and the point would be those are mostly people that went there because they're a part of it. And the informants were the ones that were being used by whatever their claim, the Southern Poverty Law Center. But yet you get Nick and the rest going, staged, it's all fake. They did everything. It's all, and that broadcasts out into every single Nazi thing. It's all fake now. Alex doing the same thing, all of them. When the evidence, you understand, is about an indictment for informants within specific groups. It's just painful how bad these people are at their job. But again, I argue their job is to do it that way.
Well, we know that they were part of those. They were part of it. Whether they were the leaders or the initiators, that'll come out, I think, eventually. But what we do know is that the very entities that this group was raising.
It's weird that they're being very careful not to release the name, don't you think? And I think that's why. They know we've been paying attention to this. Like, just generally speaking, that people in the media, independent, have been paying attention to this.
Raising money to go against are the very entities that they were taking the money in and paying to these entities and these individuals associated with those groups.
Well, just like you guys, just like Israel with Hamas. I mean, it's like what you guys literally do. You've been doing this, moderate rebels, left and right. This is not new, guys. This is just a smaller example of what they do everywhere in the world. The entirety of our government.
What was the money used for?
Well, we don't know, because again, all we know is that they set up these fictitious bank accounts.
Oh, great. So now we don't even know what it was used for. But I thought it was all staged. I thought the entire thing, now to be clear, I'm being facetious only because I think it is obvious how they're using this the way they want. Not that I'm suggesting, because I mean, you guys know my opinion. I think this is obvious, and I've already stated it many times. The point, though, is to recognize what he's saying right there is that, well, we don't even know. So how can you possibly be making the argument that this entire thing was staged? Now, I'm not talking about Blanche. I'm talking about every other 2 million follower account on Twitter that is out there screaming this, that gets shared by Elon Musk, that are literally arguing these things that we know are fake, that Alex Jones did a show about. That has to be thought about, because at the point we have an indictment. When we an indictment, meaning it's not verified, not proven, they're not guilty yet about things that we don't even know the money. So that's why it's wire fraud. That's why it's conspiracy to commit money laundering. What if it was about stock trades or, whatever, something completely disparate? I don't think that. But you don't know either out there, Nick's Order and the rest, but you were all fronting it as you do, as usual.
Fake names, like the Constitution Group or whatever it was called. Then they had one called Fox Photography.
Right. Completely fictitious as far as the investigation has shown.
Oh, dude, is that right? Funny. Yeah, it's fake. It's fake. It's totally not, but you might think it is.
They were using it simply to funnel money to these individuals. The indictment
follow up on that.
Talks about a situation where they paid an individual to steal documents from the organization. And
so that's what an informant, right? I mean, you could argue that's even an illegal action, but the point is that is more in the line with the fact that they're trying to inform on them as opposed to be a part of it. Again, I think it's obvious that it's largely both. There's people within these organizations, like with USAID, who believe they're doing this for the right reasons, who are being used by the people who are ultimately using it for the wrong reasons. My opinion, right? But that's what nuance looks like. And it's not all or nothing. I mean, it's almost, it's rare that that's the case.
And then return the documents. And then when somebody else took the hit for it, they paid that person too, to take the hit for that. And so.
Yeah, and that's crazy. And they should be held accountable for it if and when you prove that. But it wouldn't surprise me. And I think it's obvious this is something that is, I mean, they've just described literally every single government scam in my entire life. It's just funny how ubiquitous this is. Another massive leftist hoax. Right. Did you wait for, yeah, great job, Nick. The indictment that hasn't been verified yet. You're certain? And now they've been indicted for it. I bet you he doesn't know what that word means. Now, this is from 2022. This is the account I was using when we were censored on Twitter for a long time. One of the pirate accounts I was using. Verifiable facts. Please verify that for yourself. Don't take my word for it, but these are easily, and I'll include the links here as well as the links here. U.S. Congress made sure, and I posted this as well about this, a reminder below for all those jumping at the deliberately one-sided SPLC story. This story is being used to deflect from numerous disasters taking place in this admin and entire government, and it ties back to both sides of the paradigm. Now, verifiable facts. U.S. Congress made sure the Azov Battalion would get U.S. arms in 2016. And again after that, by the way. Multiple times that has made sure that the weapons went to that group, despite it being illegal for them to do so. There's more nuance in there, but I'm just trying to do this quick. And that's important to understand, which means they've always known what they were doing. And that's what gets into the not just Azov conversation, where it's documents that go back to 1948 showing you the CIA has been cultivating this group, or just a group of fascistic elements in Ukraine for changing reasons over the decades, but that they've been doing it, just like they've been doing in Syria and everywhere else. So the point in this case was that in 2016, and then after that, through multiple administrations, both Trump's and Biden's, they were continuing to do so. And even before that. So that was one. CIA has trained them since 2015. All of this is verifiable in this documentation, which I have right here that we can read. I put the links for you. You could check out for yourself. And in this case, I'll just go through these actual posts. It says, and this one is directly from this is documentation from the FBI. It says on August 1st, 2018, and you can see right there, founding RAM, that's Rise Above Movement, as it says again down here. A post containing a photograph of the Rise Above movement members, I always do that, during their trip to Germany, Ukraine, and Italy, meeting with Olena Smenkyo, who's a representative of the Azov movement, the leader of the International Department for the National Corps, that's the Azov movement, which is a political party in the Ukraine that founded in 2016 out of the regiment of the Ukrainian military called the Azov Battalion, which they all said going forward, battalion. No, it was the movement because they stopped being the battalion when they became a political movement that took over the police force and everything else that they all lied about. And it says, I know, based on my training experience, I know, and this is the expert speaking on their to the authorities, I know that the Azov Battalion is a paramilitary unit of the Ukrainian National Guard, which is known for its association with neo-Nazi ideology and use of Nazi symbolism, and which is believed to have participated in training and radicalizing United States-based white supremacy organizations. Congress, and this is the one about funding them. They've removed the ban on the funding of these groups. Yahoo News report in January described a covert CIA training program for the elite Ukrainian Special Operations Forces and other intelligence personnel that was launched in 2015 by the Obama administration. And before you jump, was carried on through every left and right administration right up until the Ukraine-Russia war. And as another expert speaking with Newsweek, he cites as a prominent example the Azov Special Operations Detachment, also known as the Azov Battalion or the Azov Movement. Largely, it was established by the Ukrainian Ministry of the Interior. It was later transferred to the National Guard. So more than just a battalion. It says via Azov's political wing, the National Corps, like you just saw in that document, described by researchers as neo-Nazi. The movement has gone international. Okay? Known contacts in Germany's neo-Nazi Third Path, America's Rise Above Movement, and Italy's Casa Pound. Now, this article, which again, this is not just from one statement. This is all many which ways overlapped. This is from 2022. I just want you to understand that. So what we're talking about is all, at that point, it was very clear that the Rise Above Movement was overlapped with this group, and it goes back well before that. So back to the tweet itself. Verifiable facts. They knew that they were funding them and armed them. They made sure it happened despite the fact that it was illegal. The CIA trained them well before 2015. When I made this tweet, I had yet to go deeper into this point. And it says since, but well before. FBI verified that the Azov Battalion is neo-Nazi, which we all know, it's very clear, is immersed in their government, which we should also know by now, and that those in Charlottesville are their U.S. faction. Now, the reason that's so important is because this was something larger than just a random rally for one idea. Okay, this was the Azov movement element, in my opinion, based on the connection that was being used in this country, and that overlapped with the larger conversation as it went forward with, I think, how it was being set up by Israel. My opinion. You can decide for yourself. The rest of the point is about knowing that they're connected. The idea was to create this idea that Russia was infiltrating the United States, and it was using the Republicans to do it while Biden was in power. I think it fell apart. Remember, we had the example of the path or the base. Let's see if it pops up. The base is a group right here. Literally, the base is Al-Qaeda translates to the base in English. So the base was a group that was created by a former State Department element that had massive intelligence and military background. and randomly moved to Russia and decided to start this terrorist group that then was overlapping with the same things, the same Azov, the same Rise Above. And I'm telling you, my opinion, to sum it up very quickly, was that this fell apart. It didn't work, and things changed. And so my point is that this was just a lingering, just like back before with the CIA and the Azov, whatever it was at the time, the fascistic elements, or like Afghanistan, the Mujahideen. It becomes a thing that they drop because they're no longer in the moment needed, but they're there still. And they get reused down the line with other agendas. And so this is how this grew. And then they moved on to their own elements. Like I told you, Mykola Lebed was a Nazi war criminal who the U.S. government brought into the United States and used. Here's the actual document, if you guys want to check it out, directly from the CIA. Project Aerodynamic. His name was Mr. Mykola Lebed. Now, the point was, and then the company he started in New York and Ukraine was called Prologue. And guys, this is a verifiable Nazi war criminal, not just a Nazi or extremist, but a Nazi war criminal who they rescued and allowed to run a media company in New York City and in Ukraine. Okay, and so this grew ever since then. So all the way to today, the point is you have this group that when they decided to start utilizing, that's what I think happened. And why that's so important is that it goes across multiple administrations, multiple parties, and all leads to the same point. Israel, the CIA. All this is in there for you to look at. Now, 4 indicted on charges stemming from 2017. Charlottesville Unite the Right rally. This is from 2018. As it says, a federal grand jury has indicted 4 California men on conspiracy and rioting charges. Guess what? Every single one of those 4 people were part of the Rise Above movement. Funny how that's not being focused on in this whole thing, when weirdly they seem to be focusing on the Charlottesville point. Why? I think you know why. I think that's an important moment where this ties into a lot of other agendas. So, they talked about the Ku Klux Klan. Why are they focusing on the Charlottesville point? Because there was an interesting inflection point there, guys. This is what I think is going on. The prosecutors say the men were members of the Rise Above movement. All 4 of the people they indicted for that very thing. Interesting, right? And those are some of like the Robert Rundo and the different conversations we've talked about over the years. Now, this is one of the things I linked to in the other show. I'll include all these for you to read. 2022, shady U.S.-funded contractors, DynCorp. Actually, the second part was Blackwater operating in Ukraine alongside U.S.-backed extremists. Now, this gets into 2022. Azov Italian ties to Charlottesville and the CIA. We go through a lot of it then. This one's from later in the year. Ukraine CIA ties to Unite the Right rally. Similar kind of juxtaposition I did for today. Same idea. Most of them are using this one, right? But the point is, on the other show, this one, the Azov movement, before that. I mean, there's a reason they look the same. It was an emulation of the same thing for a very clear reason, because even the Azov movement was built into the thing they wanted to look like. Now, again, this point was just, I've already pretty much said it, but documents prove the CIA cultivated this thing since 1948. And I believe that, Israel's and really Zionism's enter onto the field of the conversation over the years. I think this was something that they utilized. Now, you could even argue back then, even today, people disagree with what drives what. You can argue the U.S. is the one driving Israel, and that might even make sense in some ways. So either way, that ultimately you have this overlap where now you can see Israel and the ADL, which we'll get into next, doing this on a near daily basis. Go read through this. It's wild. It's insane, the stuff that they're openly talking about in this. Now, we did this show in 2024. Zionism versus Nazism, which is a whole thing, by the way. If you haven't gone into that, I can just bring up this one, which is one I often grab because it's just easy to bring up. But Dan Cohen pointing out, or even this is even a better one, the Haaretz leading Israeli newspaper platform that says Zionist militias' efforts to recruit Nazis in fights against British are revealed. We're talking back to the origin of Zionism, because if you could understand the reality, which is that they tried to align themselves, the Lehigh Party was the origin point of Zionism, with Nazi Germany, even after the final solution had begun. Well, if you don't know that, then you fundamentally don't understand what Zionism and what Israel ultimately are. And this is the point. Because we're taught that they were created because of the thing. No, that's not the reality, guys. This is something you can easily verify for yourself. And here, this is one of the people they brought out before October 7th, who was one of the famous members still alive of the Lehigh Party. And what does he say? Go out there and don't leave anybody behind. Don't erase the memory of them. He says, erase them, their families, mothers, and children, because they're the good guys, right, guys? They praised that. They literally took them out there to speak to the soldiers by the car. This is one of the guys in those videos laughing about raping children or raping women. It's not a joke. In any case, I'll include that for you to check out for yourself. Some of this stuff is just so hard for people to hear that they just turn off. I get it. But the point is, we discussed that overlap and how alarming it is. We also discuss Israel's connection to extremist ideology and the ADL's history of faking Nazi marches, which is what we'll get into next here. Just a quick point again, because we've talked about this many times. I'll reiterate what we talk about in that show. Here's an article, Skokie, the legacy of the would-be Nazi march in a town of Holocaust survivors. Now, this is 2018 because they were overlapping it with Charlottesville. Well, the point in this, if you understand, it says, but while the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, which left one woman dead, may be the most recent example, it wasn't the first time neo-Nazis have committed or come out in force. Well, you know what they're pointing to, guys? Skokie, this conversation. Nazi march turns out to be a hoax. Now, I've gone through this many times. There's multiple pieces of this that bring it all together. I think his name was Mordecai Levy. He was an agent that was literally caught to be pretending to be somebody else working for the Israeli intelligence. And this is literally on the Jewish Telegraphic Agency. They're talking about this exact conversation. And you can even read it all the way through because they're talking about, where is it? Right? Specifically the march that they planned in Skokie, right? This is what we're talking about. And at the end of the day, guys, this is something that they've been responsible for many, many times. I mean, verifiably so, but people just pretend it's not the case, where they will fake. I mean, I could bring up shows of how many times you have Zionists out there, and I don't mean synonymous with Jew, by the way. I mean Zionist, saying any number of lies about people that were being racial. Like, look at what happened during the protests on college campuses. Do people still not yet recognize how completely one-sided that was? There were clearly responses, but there was so many lies that and you had, like I said, Stefanik up there with her hands shaking, screaming about how people are being attacked. And the police officer told her right to her face, that didn't happen. Just didn't stop her though, clearly. So my point is there's a lot of fake. Doesn't mean you should deny the fact that people can be racist or carry out attacks against Jews or anybody else, but recognize how often these things are used against you. And then they come out and they censor your speech and they restrict your rights. And that's how this has always gone. So that's why right now with this whole massive story, you need to recognize that it will end up in a way when you're only looking at half the story that nothing ever changes. But what they'll get is your support, I guess, and the belief that somehow that it's only one side that's the problem. And so you'll support, and it just becomes deep, deep division that can never be bridged, and they'll go on forever. Now, a couple more points on this before we finish with some updates on Iran. Now, this is what he came out with. This was yesterday. It says, Alex Jones said, for more than 30 years, Alex Jones has exposed the fact that the SPLC runs every white supremacy organization. Now, there's some level of connection there, but you have to understand that we're talking about many, many, many groups that have many different connections that don't tie back to Democrats alone. But that's what he's pointing to. That's what he's doing. He says that every white supremacist organization in North America and is funded by NATO intelligence, German intelligence, and MI6. Well, look into what he's saying. Consider it for yourself. But recognize what this spinning out bombastic overlap to a very, very specific story. And I don't mean just about what I'm highlighting for the U.S. government funding this group. I'm talking about the Unite the Right rally, Charlottesville, and what that means for all the rest of it. That you should then question, not then go, oh, therefore, then they fund that group because that one. That's called stupid. That's called assumption. That's called being manipulated. Even if you end up being right, it's important that you prove these things. What this person does, I think, is by design. And I've called that. I like to believe it's very obvious today, whether or not he's right, whether or not he believes he's doing the right thing. That's how you have to look at this, guys. But as I said, this is Alex's job in my mind. Deflection. This is only half the story and not even the entirely accurate. Any way they can get you to only focus on only half of the government, thereby stopping any possible change, they will do it. This was a whole of government agenda. That's not what you're going to get from these guys. And he puts this out today. Bombshell. The DOJ has now confirmed that the Biden admin was in full command of the SPLC. No, they did not. And that they were funding every Nazi organization in America. See, you take this to a stupid level. Like, even if that's true, like, and this is like the gay frog discussion, guys, for those that know what I'm talking about. There's a story that was very real. I brought this up many times over the years about runoff in the environment that was causing hormonal changes because we're talking about endocrine disrupting chemicals. And that got turned into it's turning the frogs gay with a big frog suit. And that's just stupid. Now, whether he had good intentions or not, that became the reason. And that's dumb for them to do it. But that became the reason for some people to dismiss that story. And I argue that's why. Which we can see now, we're still barely even dealing with the reality of endocrine disrupting chemicals and all of it that's in our life. But so you come out with a story which should matter, which shows if this is accurate, which I argue it's probably built in a way that will flounder and fail because they don't want this to stop, the whole of government. But let's just say you have the evidence of wire fraud and money laundering. You turn that into the DOJ's confirmed that Biden controlled the group we're accusing, and that every Nazi group in the whole country is funded by that Biden controlled group. You go have fun verifying that statement. Now, I consider that, of course. And then my mind would immediately laugh at how silly it is to pretend that somehow only Biden or only one part of our government would be involved in something that spanned across multiple generations. That's just me, though, logic. But I think it's important to think about how, as he says, part of a larger Obama project to create division. I mean, think about with what we're dealing with today, and this person is still leaning into the childish, juvenile two-party system. I mean, aren't you being called out by Trump? I mean, it's just painful. Not that that should therefore open your mind to the two-party illusion, but, the point is, if you can't see by now that they're the same thing with what you were shouting us down for telling you we'd be here, and now you still find reasons to go, he's fighting the deep state because he did something that might not even really change anything. Well, I'm sure you can piece that together. Gunther Eagleman comes out and says, Southern Poverty Law Center was funding the KKK. This should be the biggest story in the media. Oh, well, when it's verified, then we can talk about it, Gunther. That they were funding that is an allegation. But I'm sorry for the new media may not understand the difference of these terms. As if he's really even close to that. I mean, they represent themselves as such, but he's not even, there's some people out there that do actual engaged reporting. He's not one of them, in my opinion, but they still all they pretend they're that. But come on, it is the case even ridiculous Kash Patel said allegedly, here's a muse, same point. And this was what I was saying earlier, guys. I mean, remember, there is no information in their indictment about this group. Now, as I've made the case before, there are overlaps within these groups, but that does not mean that the group itself was then now being accused of being funded by SPLC. And it wouldn't surprise me, but as this person, all the rest are doing, hate hoax. It was clear the Patriot Front was fake from the start. I agree. I don't think I've proven that, but I agree. It's very, very clear. There's many indications that there was coordination, manipulation. But like before, does it mean every one of them are fake? Or does it mean that one of them is and the rest of them think they're doing something else? You see, I don't know. That's the honest way to respond to that. But it says, but I assumed it was the FBI and had to, and he says, I had to idea it was backed. That's what it says. It's a typo. I had to idea it was backed by a Democrat NGO funded by Soros NGO, but it makes perfect sense. Maybe I had no idea. To the demand for racism exceeded the supply. Well, I mean, are you confused about the fact that the current administration is using racism the same way? Right now against anti-Semitism and Palestine and Muslim? I mean, or is it only when one side does it in the ways you like? I mean, it's just silly, right? You're doing the same thing from both sides of the paradigm, but overall the same idea. You're pointing to the Patriot Front. That's not what was in their indictment. Why did they all, to a man, reflectively point to the one group that wasn't included? Feels like a coordinated thing to me. I don't even know why. I would say maybe because they want to make sure it doesn't go anywhere, right? So instead of making people dive down the rabbit hole of the Rise Above movement and find out what it connects to, you go the Patriot Front, even though that's not included in the indictment. This is what we always deal with, guys. Is there any evidence that the SPLC funded the Patriot Front? Grok, not that we should trust Grok, but maybe the partisans will hear it when they look at their own stupidity. And it says, no, there is no credible evidence that they funded the Patriot Front. But I'm not going to say that I know that for sure, because I think most of these groups will probably connect back in some way to some larger funding mechanism. But my case is always is that I can't prove that right now, so I'm not going to go out there and say that. Here's Representative Andy Ogles. Looks like this SPLC could have been bankrolled by Nazi U-Hauls in Nashville. Oh, and there you go, pointing to, guess what? The very thing that we called out when that was happening, that they all called us crazy for, that they all protected. They all said, well, they're just fighting. This is what I shouldn't say they all, but a lot of them, and even I would say they have a right to go out there and do and say what they want, even if it's manipulated, because that's your right. But what's funny to me is suddenly now you point to the thing and it's not even about them, but they all go the thing. Look at Patriot Front. Well, we talked about the U-Hauls and how the police, in fact, right there, how the police grabbed them, somehow let them keep their masks on and their gloves and whatever else and put them in handcuffs. Okay, this was so obviously not standard operating procedure, and many of them got shuffled into a U-Haul and they drove away. We all talked about that multiple times. Funny how Randy only seems to, or Andy, excuse me, the rest of them suddenly jump on the story because now it's about something that wasn't even part. It's weirdly coordinated. But I want to point out, it could just be like social contagion. I think that's a huge part of where we are right now. I do believe it's like there's an agenda, but that's why I'm talking about it. But I think there's a part of this that's just pandering laziness. Like a lot of these ridiculous people who just want to be involved, who just yell the thing everyone else is saying. That's a huge part of this. But here's Wall Street Math from 2024. I thought it was illegal to have people in the back of a truck like that, right? He did call it out. I did too at the time. Now you care about it. Okay, here is Health Ranger. Alec Lay says Patriot Front was always the most obvious fake white supremacy hustle. This leaked video should have spelled it out for anyone paying attention. Yeah, I agree. It's ridiculous. Doesn't mean we can prove it because of a weird video or that we know that everyone. I think the case is there's people involved that believe what they're doing. I do think that. That's always the case with these groups because it's actually very difficult to have a massive group of all, that gets found out. Somebody's mask gets pulled down, right? At the end of the day, you can see people that believe, I think, what they're doing. The point here is to assume the case, make the argument. Health Ranger says it was so fake from the very start, all funded by left-wing organizations. Well, that's sad. I said right back into the partisan fold. Too bad. A lot of people are starting to call out Trump. I'd like to believe that means they're beginning to recognize the two-party illusion. To say this is funded by left-wing organizations with nothing but an indictment shows me that anybody doing that is willing, eager to lean back into the two-party illusion as soon as it's an opportunity. Patriot Front, January 6th, and the Vanilla ISIS PSYOP. Talk about this one. This is an important article you should read. I've went over it many times. Whitney Webb wrote this for Last American Vagabond 2022, Ukraine and the new Al-Qaeda. And it's exactly what it sounds like. I mean, the base is a point made in here. It's just simply about the reimagining of the situation. And I think it failed, to be quite honest. I think it's something faltered and stumbled. Now they're back to pointing to Al-Qaeda, ISIS-K, I've made a point about. They need a construct, guys. That's what this is, in my opinion. Now, Loomer, of course, you can't not mention Loomer in this ridiculous story because of what she did before. Just a passing point to end. She comes out and says, so Charlottesville was an inside job? Remember when they called us crazy for saying that? God, and this is the game, guys, because what she actually did, as I pointed out, was she jumped on this story just before October 7th, pretending like she broke the story. I even said Alex Rubinstein was talking about this way longer than I was. But my point was I was banging my head against this when it felt like nobody was talking about it, save for people like Alex. And it was frustrating because it was so obvious what was happening. And it wasn't one side or the other. But she, after suddenly October, says she jumps on this story, interestingly, and showing that she might have had some insight about what might be coming. And then weirdly, intentionally omitting every single tie to Israel, which, by the way, is like a fourth of the story. It's a huge part of what the Azad movement is. I mean, look, I can show you this right now, which is the easiest thing to bring up directly from Haaretz. Rights groups demand Israel stop arming neo-Nazis in Ukraine. Again, every time I show this, I'm sure somebody's going, what? 2018, the Azov militia. That's what we're talking about. Israelis were going, what are you doing? Are you funding Nazis? That seems like it makes no sense, but it does make sense when you understand the real story. Public, sorry, by the way, if you just want to look and not be shouted down by screaming Zionists who tell you you're racist for wanting to look at the truth. Overall, again, that's not about Judaism, if you understand what I'm saying. Overall, though, sorry, but there we go. She basically jumped on this story to omit, in my opinion, the important ties to Israel right before this all comes. Like, think about where we are right now. Before this, Israel was clearly a large, political talking point. People discussed it, but now everything has shifted. And what did a lot of people do that had never done it before? Well, they went down the Israel rabbit holes and they started looking at different points. And I think that this was an important part that's well bigger than just Russia. I mean, there's even conversation about Israel seeing Ukraine historically and going in the future about some kind of profit, like future Zionism or like Zion, and this is Vanessa Beeley and I talked about this. So either way you look at it, the point is that there was an important overlap with Israel and these, everything we're dealing with today, quite obviously. And I think that's why she did that. But now she comes and goes, see the lefties, we told you. And it all gets tied up with a neat little bow. That's not by accident. Please learn the reality of this. Now, to finish with some Iran conversation, again, it's mostly you probably already well aware of the general circumstance. But a couple points before we get into the actual ships and Strait of Hormuz, drop site news. You probably heard about this. Speaking of ridiculous Laura Loomer, 2 Iranian women in ICE detention are not, in fact, related to Qasem Soleimani. Now, you may wonder why that's even there, right? Well, because Laura Loomer personally highlighted people because of their names, and this absurd, incompetent U.S. government arrested them. On the word of a cartoon like Laura Loomer. I mean, to me, that either shows like we're worried about, like an incredibly alarming level of incompetence and stupidity, or that they just didn't care and that they're willing to lean into that because it's whatever agenda they're working with. It's incredible to me. After Laura Loomer pointed to 2 women she claimed were connected to the late Iran military commander, which, by the way, wouldn't even be a problem or a crime. The man was not what they claimed he was. And even then, that doesn't mean it's a crime because you're related to somebody. They were arrested and remain in immigration detention. One, at this moment on the 22nd, is gravely ill. Yeah, that's it. We read no real charge, Loomer said. And so we're going to hold him in This is so disgusting. So Mel writes, our Secretary of State, acting on a tip from a mentally ill influencer, arrested and is detaining 2 legal citizens with green cards for the crime of having the wrong last names. There's everything about this is illegal, unconstitutional, shows you what we're dealing with. And as Alex writes, their primary purpose is to humiliate and demoralize us. See also the Biden administration. Right? Exactly. See, people who are, mature enough to look beyond one partisan idea can see the consistency everywhere. And I'm of the mind that most of you are already there. We're just not being allowed to see that in the mainstream alternative construct that's designed to keep us divided and believing that we're the minority when we're not. Now, this is, by the way, one of those major accounts that this is 1.4 million followers, but there's like 11 different versions of this very similar account that all have like 1 million followers. And it was one of the main ones that got exposed to be basically bot. You could, who knows if there's a person, but it's a farmed kind of dynamic. And it says, just in, President Trump just saved the lives of 8 women in Iran. I'm sure you already saw this story. Of course, no one's talking about it, they say. And Trump says, very good news. I've just been informed. Now, here's how this actually went. Trump gets wind by Ikola Ilbed or whatever that ridiculous Zionist propagandist is, and I'll get to him in a second. He's the one that came out and said the story. These women are going to be killed by Iran. They were AI-generated images. You can prove that. Simple. I mean, feel free, guys. It's very easy to prove. And what's crazy is then that gets picked up by Trump and the rest. And Trump goes, they're going to assassinate or they're going to execute these women. Now, here's the crazy part. It's not happening. I'm telling you guys, it's a fake story. Trump comes out later in the day and says, Iran promised that they're not going to kill them. Not a joke. So the question remains, like I'm continually considering about this whole thing, is Trump just that bad? I mean, I don't think he's that bad of a liar. You could have made up a better lie than that. Or is he being misled by Witkoff and Kushner? Did he really think that that's what happened? Did he really think that his bluster, you better not, was enough to get Ron to go, no, and stop, even though that's clearly not what's happening? I mean, is he that easy to manipulate? You can decide. I just think it's insane. And I think it's either wild desperation that he doesn't know what else to do and he needs, because he's a hubristic, he's a narcissist, to be seen as the one winning, even though he knows we all see through it. I don't know. Or he's not even in control, which is also something we should ask. Here's the story. Trump says Iran agreed not to execute 8 women at his request. So let me get this straight. So you're dealing with a government that's laughing at you, that's ignoring what you're saying, that's every day proving that what you say means nothing, even though they're begging and then it doesn't happen. We'll bomb you if you don't. That doesn't happen. You better not, and we will. It doesn't happen. Oh, fine, we'll extend it indefinitely. And it's just like, you can't misunderstand that. So at his request, the group that's ignoring everything suddenly goes, yeah, okay, Trump, we'll listen to you this time. It's just sad. He can't think that's happening. So nice of Iran to promise not to execute those AI-generated images of women that Trump yelled about, especially since they have not even talked to Trump today, which we can prove. It must have been a carrier pigeon. So, I mean, who knows, guys? It's just wild. So Glenn says, for the people who decided to believe that those 8 Iranian women in those pictures spread by Israeli propagandists were to be eminently executed by Iran, and also believe Trump's claim that he heroically saved them, can you point to any evidentiary basis for these claims? And the bottom line is somebody responded and he went through it, and it's this guy. Spread by the courageous Israel loyal hero, as many have. It's this guy. We've talked about him many times. Eli Jacoby. These people are ridiculous, but they grow and reach on this platform because this platform makes that the case. You have to understand, guys, these people get caught. It's not just like my opinion about what they're saying. They get caught lying near daily. And yet they just keep growing in influence. It's because this platform is designed that way, guys. I'm telling you, that's the reality. And on that very note, Wired magazine, I spoke to a med student in India, he says, who made thousands of dollars duping MAGA fans by creating a blonde AI influencer named Emily Hart. We've talked about her before. Here's how he did it. Now, again, before we get into, well, there's only one point to make, but if you think it's unique to one side or the other, you're not paying attention. Guys, this is what they do, the government. And what's interesting is right now, I think the interest seems to be to focus on the Republicans. Just like during COVID, it was more so the Democrats. This is interesting, right? And so what we're seeing is that we live in an illusion. That's not everything all the time, but there is a very, very artificial part of everything we're dealing with. So when I say that most people see it, consider that. And consider that what you look at when you see it all is that they're convincing you that everybody doesn't, when in reality, you pass someone on the street and they're just kind of shy and they don't want to say it because they think you'll think they're crazy. So when I hear that, I ask anybody on the street and nobody knows, well, maybe they do. Maybe they're so convinced that they shouldn't say it that they keep quiet, just like in COVID-19. Just consider these things because, guys, there is an obvious game being played and people are falling for it. This is the majority of the partisan political game today in this dying empire. Prove me wrong. And if you think this is unique to Republicans, you're not paying attention. Now, 10th Amendment Center, this is their opinion, but it's harsh, but I tend to agree. Rapid Estrance put this out first saying, I'm winning a war. A war. Oh, yes, it is. By a lot, he says. Just bear this in mind. Even with this was on the 20th. Think about what's happened since. By a lot, he says. Things are going very well. Our military's been amazing. And if you read the fake news, like the failing New York Times, the absolutely horrendous and disgusting Wall Street Journal, or the now defunct, fortunately, Washington Post, you would think we're losing the war, or ignoring all those fake news platforms and just looking at the information that you can verify, or that. And it says, you would think we're losing the war. The enemy is confused because they've got these same media reports, and yet they realize their Navy's been completely wiped out. Aside from the ships we just talked about, taking other ships or the bombings or the, you can verify this. And you must know that he can see that. Now, my point again is that then Kushner and Witkoff going, that's a lie, Trump. That's the fake news media. And maybe he buys that. There must be some kind of a magical air around these people that they can convince this man, if that's the case, that nothing he sees is actually happening. Or he's desperate, trying to hide it, or he's not in control. There are only 3 things that make sense to me right now. The enemy's confused, basically because they think they're winning. It's like, well, maybe they are, and you're confused, Trump. And it says the Air Force has gone into darker runways. This is all just what your narrative is. They have no anti-air. That's not true. They're every day proving that they have the things that you claim they don't have. I shouldn't say every day at this point, but as of right now, it's been repeatedly shown up until the very last time that they were exchanging that they have everything they're claiming they don't. And you don't have to ask me, look at the general conversation that's not partisan, and it's very clear And it says their former leaders are mostly gone. They killed a lot of people, but that's not the case based on what I can see. We're talking about one person removed, guys. It was Khomeini's son who's currently there. That's it. This game he plays where they've taken out 3 different groupings of just, I don't know where he comes up with this stuff unless he's being misled. And it says this has been, in addition to everything else, regime change. Okay. How exactly? They're still in power, the same government. They're the same people that you want to remove. You're still telling us we have to stop their program. So because you effectively moved a new person in position that you still don't want there, he's trying to either he actually thinks that makes sense, which is really embarrassing, or he's just trying to manipulate you. We did it. It's over, right, guys? So if you think it's over, then I can stop. Is it over? Did we win? Yay, let's move on. We beat them. We won. Don't look over there. Don't look at our, that's what it feels like. It's desperate. And it says, and perhaps most of all, the blockade, which we will not take off until there's a deal. Well, again, the blockade that they agreed to remove of the last alleged ceasefire was the reason the ceasefire fell. Trump goes on to say they violated the ceasefire. Well, the only thing that stopped it for 2 days was your illegal blockade. Everyone said that publicly, and we just sat there and waited, and suddenly, oh, now they're doing this and attacking a ship. Well, it's because of the reality that you created. It's just either he doesn't know that or he's lying to you. Now, again, keeping a blockade until there's a so-called deal is going to guarantee a restriction of the flow, which is what I think they wanted in the first place. They're the ones effectively creating this, you understand? Because right now, Iran is welcoming people through as long as they go through, I shouldn't say welcoming, but allowing people, as long as they go through the routes that they've discussed, which is what Trump's administration agreed to and then lied about, and that they have to work with Iranian ships and go through. All the ones will get briefly, maybe I don't have the point, but the ones they fired on, it seems pretty clear that they did not go along with the route. Now, you could disagree with that. You can say that shouldn't be the way it is. Fair. I don't know why, because it's what every other location does with their own territorial waters, which is what this is. Omani and Iranian at the choke point. It's what it is. So they have every right to do this. The point would be that you can disagree with maybe you just don't like it. Fine. The point is that still, that where was I? Hold on, I just lost was it the blockade? Oh, that ultimately that Trump's continued blockade. I think that's where it was. Sorry, I was thinking about I always do that. I think about things as I'm talking. But that ultimately the blockade is the reason that this ultimately failed. I might have missed a point there, but that's the real larger point. And it was designed like that, right? That ultimately they should have just removed the blockade and everything would have basically drifted forward. Oh, that's really what it was. That ultimately, if the ships that went through afterward they fired on were because they did not take the route that Iran said they had to. It's simple. I mean, and ultimately, as far as I can tell, they just fired on them and brought them into port. They didn't sink the ships and steal everything. It's a weird overlapping point. But question everything, including what Iran is saying. My point is that every other time so far, you're hearing what they say and Trump says, and then you wait because that's what we do. And then a week goes by and you look back and go, well, obviously Trump lied. And obviously what Iran said is what carried through. So we should still question what they're saying, but every single day you get more examples that shows that it's more likely Trump is deceiving you. And it says it's absolutely destroying Iran. Not that I can see. Look, you've been sanctioning them forever. What you're doing, you claim is costing $500 billion a day, and all of your lackeys are parroting the same thing. But at the same time, I can come around and go, well, what about these 34 tankers that slip past you that everyone can acknowledge that you lie about? You see, is that by design? I don't think so. I think this is incompetence or an unwillingness to truly push it where he wants to. You can decide for yourself. This is the reality. This is a post from April 22nd. They have gotten through. So the lie of the $1 million, so they're not suffering like he claims they are at the very least. An unsustainable number, he says, but it's not happening. He says the anti-American fake news media is rooting for Iran to win. Well, you could argue that. By reporting that you're lying is nothing other than reporting that you're lying. But it's not going to happen because I'm in charge. Of course, that makes sense, right? Because Trump's the best. Therefore, no matter what, right? I mean, that's the insane level of hubris of this man. Just like these unpatriotic people used every ounce of their limited strength, of course, you like that, to fight me in the election. Limited strength. Like you're such a child. You have to say that. They continue to do so with Iran. The result will be the same. It already is. Okay. That's just laughable. The result will be the same. We won though. We win already because we won and it's over. Even though they have to give us the thing, but we win already because we won. It's laughable. 10th Amendment Center says the whole "this isn't a war" thing was always a lie, right? What was that about? This whole push about this not being, and here we are, I'm winning the war. Okay, well, it didn't just become a war in the last week. It was when it started, obviously, if it is now. So they just tried to lie to you and gave up. Yep, pretty easy. And as they write, just an oath breaker traitor who wanted to trick his treasonous followers into supporting him trashing the Constitution on war powers. Now, if you want to call them treasonous for supporting this at the moment, I mean, it's harsh. Maybe they're confused. Maybe they don't see it all. Some of them probably are, in the sense that they're supporting something that is anti-American. But I want to also point out that I think most of the conservative people in this country are not okay with what's happening. My opinion. I think you can, there's evidence to make that case very clearly. So, briefly, won't go into it extensively because I've made the point many times. I just wanted you to see that on the 20th, guys, the White House rapid response account came out with this post from 60 Minutes where they put out their lackey guide that said all the things that rather use the same 60% point we've made many times to claim that Iran had all the things Trump claimed. 60 Minutes, Iran still has nearly 1,000 pounds. Yep, that's the 465 kilograms we've talked about many times of highly enriched uranium. Enriched, yes. Enough material if you enrich it, not a little bit, but a lot of it further, for 10 to 11 nuclear bombs. That's just absurd. It's absurd what he's saying, guys. Plenty of experts have literally laughed out of their chair about this guy. But my point is the same. But he says Iran has been lying about its nuclear weapons for 20 years. Yeah, lying about its weapons of nuclear capacity for 20 years, but yet magically didn't do the thing that they all told you they would do the moment they had nuclear weapons. What a magical story. Okay, so as always, guys, for those that didn't see it, the reality is the Director General from the International Atomic Energy Agency, the group that they tell you will confirm this right now, should there be a deal, told you at the end of 2025 explicitly that, again, they're basically him saying, as I stated before, based on the inspections conducted at the relevant facilities, since then, Iran's uranium stockpiles remain under safeguards in accordance with their safeguard agreements. And that is 60%, over 400 kilograms, meaning that the 465, about equivalent to a little over 1,000 pounds, up to 60%, not entirely all of it, but up to, is within their safeguard. You know this. I've talked about it many times. So this is the White House, either through stupidity, which I just don't believe, deliberately misleading people, which, oh my God, what a shock, right? As I state the same point right there. And then even crazier than that, you get people like this. This guy is so disgustingly dishonest. Or a wildly pseudo-intellectual, if you think that this is what the reality is. Dinesh D'Souza, 60 Minutes has admitted the POTUS was right about Iran's nuclear abilities. Are you serious? I mean, it's just insane to me how people will just be that dishonest or that bad at their job. I believe this person's deliberately misrepresenting this. Maybe because they're lying for their truth and they believe they really do have weapons, but will lie about it now because that's not even the root truth. It's just, I don't even know. It's wrong, guys. And I'm telling you, if you take a look at the actual documentation and more than just this, or Tulsi Gabbard's statements in the beginning of the administration that said they were not doing it, it's all right there for you. Wherever that was. Not that I had to find it again, but right here. Remain under safeguards in accordance with their comprehensive safeguard agreement. So they're lying to you, or they're stupid. And it literally went everywhere. I posted this probably 50 times that day because everybody under the sun with Republican support posted the same thing. And, oh my God, Trump was right. And all they were doing was pointing to an amount that Iran publicly disclosed because it was within their safeguard agreement, which, by the way, was not even close to being able to be turned into nuclear bombs, let alone the material to make the bombs. It has to be over 90%. They don't even have an enrichment facility, according to Trump and everybody else that's backed that up. Think about how dumb that is, guys. And here's David Stockman, who says, and this is about Dinesh D'Souza. He says, I'll tell you what, Dinesh, now just remember what I said. That point alone shows you they know they're lying. But he adds to this, hypothetically, should this be what they have? He says, I'll tell you what, Dinesh, even if you had 400 kilos or 465 or 1,000 pounds of 90%, which is what you would need to make material needed to make a bomb, he says, of the U-235 and a box of matches, the length of time it would take you to make a nuke is never. The fact is 60% enriched uranium like the Iranians had isn't even 10% of the way to the bomb. They all lie to you guys. The rest, engineering, machining, fabrication, and assembly of the watch-like innards of a nuclear implosion bomb is the real hard part. And even that ignores the fact that no one in their right mind, even the mullahs, would attempt to launch against the USA a beginner's bomb that's never been tested and which no Iranian missile could carry for the 10,000-kilometer trip to the United States in any event. Horton recently made a great point about this, saying, because of what their limitations are and what they are able to produce right now, because of this, they don't have that program, is a gigantic, like, fat boy level, the U.S.-Japan conversation, that it would be nearly impossible, if not impossible, as he's arguing, to move where they need to move it. It's so painful. Question all this, yes, but realize that everything they're pointing to, you can verify as either incorrect or wildly dishonest, and ultimately based on Iran bad guy. Not that we can prove, yes, they have it here. Like, you can prove based on the evidence we have that it's 60%, which is within their agreements. So they go, no, it's 90%. Okay, prove that. You see, on one side, we've got the International Atomic Energy Agency. On one side, we've got the Gabbard intelligence community. All of us saying, nope. On the other side, we've got Israel saying you're lying. That's my point, guys. You got the U.S. government intelligence saying that's not true. How come we can't see how clear that is? And it says, and that's to say nothing of re-entering the atmosphere successfully under blistering heat and percussion. In short, Iran's possession of 10 bombs worth of HEUs was not remotely an imminent threat, if that's the reality, which, again, the argument is that they don't own the nuclear side of it's not even the reality. But question that. It says, and that's according to the repeated attestations of the 17 U.S. intelligence agencies, including Gabbard. So what in the hell are you gumming about in your pathetic, self-evidently barking ignorance? Good for him. Oh, I thought I shared that. So, to finish, on the 21st, now again, there's many points in this that I'm not going to really dive into because, frankly, at this point, it seems irrelevant. Just recognize the current or I shouldn't say static, but the circumstances that they've created, that as I can still, like, remember, the point was the last time, I believe that the reason they went to Islamabad, even though they said they weren't going to be dealing anymore, was because Trump and his team said, we'll offer you what you want. Because remember, they weren't saying we're just never talking to you again. They said we're not negotiating. But they left Pakistan open for them to relay, like, we're giving in. Like, we'll give you the 10 points you called for. That's what they said. Okay, we'll meet. Which became very clear, at the very least, that they thought that when they sat down, because that's what they presented. Then Trump's team came and offered anything but. And of course, Netanyahu called in and they destroyed the whole thing. So still, and well before that, all they're saying is, we are no longer negotiating. You put us here because you murdered our negotiators when we were willing, again, for the 100th time, to give up, as they never have offered before, their enrichment entirely, their stockpile entirely, and their nuclear program entirely. And as he said, peace was within reach on the 28th, and Israel bombed them that night because they offered to give it up. Because that then is their excuse to go after them as they pretend they have it, because it was a civilian program. So the Islamabad overlap is important, right? Because what you see is that somebody, whether Trump or his team, lied to them about what they wanted, brought them to the table so they could then say, see, Iran's weak. They said they were done dealing and they came right back to the table. But then what happened? They said, you're lying to us and you're not honest and you're playing all these deception games and diplomacy. So we're done. How can you then argue they're weak and begging for a deal if they just left the table, right? So now it brings us to here. So he says, Iranian officials tell me, this is after the point at which there was kind of a back and forth, Trump trying to get something going. And last time they didn't show up. Which we're going. Iranian officials tell me that as of this moment, Iran won't attend the new round of talks, despite Trump and everybody saying they were on the way. Officials say Pakistan told Iran that Trump will lift the naval blockade in final hours of the ceasefire. If that happens, the ceasefire is extended. New talks should happen Thursday. Now, this has been the point from the very beginning. That, as Aragachi said on the 21st, blocking Iranian ports is an act of war and thus a violation of the ceasefire. That's basic, guys. Blockade is an act of war. It's not a peacetime ceasefire act. So at the end of the day, without question, it's also explicitly stated that was supposed to stop. And so they made their last agreement. Trump maintained the blockade. I said that in the show before it had happened. Remember, I was, okay, it looks like the blockade seems to be a violation. Mark my words, tomorrow, that'll be the reason this stops. And that was my opinion. And then the next day, it's exactly what happened. So either Trump thought for some stupid reason he could keep a military tactic going during a ceasefire, or he designed it to fail. Striking a commercial vessel and taking its crew hostage is an even greater violation. Iran knows how to neutralize restrictions, how to defend its interest, and how to resist bullying, they write. Oh, wait, let me include that one for you. It's always an important one. Just to understand the timing of this, where that they bombed them the day after they had the agreement they wanted, or the night of, actually. So now going forward to, still the 21st, and this is, remember, this is at the point of the blockade discussion. This is French President Macron says U.S. targeted Iran blockade likely caused Iran to shift position. And George Galloway says a blockade is an act of war in legal terms. You can't commit acts of war and be on a ceasefire at the same time. So if you want to go, it's a negotiating tactic. Well, yeah, I'm going to murder your entire family and, cut off their limbs. Are you going to now do what I say? Oh, it's just a negotiating tactic. It's like, this is insane what you guys pretend. For Trump to come out and say, I was just trying to be bombastic right there. For Trump to come out and say, we'll destroy your civilization. And they go, well, I just wanted to get him in play. What if they would have responded as if that was true? I mean, anybody with a brain could have thought that through. And I don't think that was him just tactics. I think he was failing. I think he was desperate and hoped that they would believe him. So, and because it ultimately was, but they didn't buy his bluff. But it's still an insanely irresponsible thing to do. So in this case, whether or not that got the move, which it didn't, by the way, we're here and it didn't happen, it's still a crime. Or rather, let's just say a violation of the ceasefire, and a legal war is a crime in and of itself. And then we come to later in that day. As you likely saw, Trump announces indefinite extension. Well, what did he argue, though? Well, they're just so confused. They don't know what's going on. Can't believe anybody, anywhere is taking this person seriously right now. Day by day, it's getting more and more impossible for even their own supporters to pretend this all makes sense. And again, I think I have the post next. They're begging for a deal. It's just about to happen. It'll be a deal by the weekend every single other day. And now you just extend it indefinitely. Well, then clearly that wasn't true the entire time. There's no way you don't know that. But he says they're just confused, so I want to give more time. Trying to look magnanimous. I just want to make sure it all works out, even though you're like, but I'll kill you if you don't. That's so stupid. But on top of that you continue to do all sorts of illegal things and support the genocide. And, you're not the peacemaker guy. I don't know why you think you can still pretend that. But it says, but I thought they were begging to make a deal ever since February 28th. How can they possibly have an indefinite ceasefire? So here we are after this, where Trump's blaming them and saying Pakistan asked me and they're confused. And Iran's just going, we don't recognize your ceasefire. That's where we are. Before we get there, though, this is what he said, Glenn Beck put on the 21st. Time is not on Iran's side. Trump is using the peace deal to remind Iran that if the strait isn't open fully, which it was before, remember, before they started this illegal war, they will be sitting on more oil than they can produce. Their stockpiles will be capped. Well, you mean aside from those 34 tankers that got through, you completely uninformed or lying person, they will be capped and they'll be forced to stop production. That time is running out. And I simply said, do you almost feel sorry for these guys right now? I don't know. I don't know if it's deliberate or they're stupid or whatever's going on. I kind of barely for like a split second. And I'm like, nah, they're terrible. So I don't care. But it's just kind of crazy, isn't it? Look at where we are. If time was not on their side, on the 23rd, would they be telling Trump to basically F off? Maybe they're lying. Maybe they're desperate and this is their ploy. We'll find out, I'm sure. But just sad. And again, the tactic, the peace deal is well, a peace deal is not a negotiating tool. Technically it is in a way, but this is Iran's whole point, is that if all you're doing is using the offer of peace to trick us into a military win, then that's disgusting. And frankly, I would argue that's even illegal. Like in the sense of what we argue under international law, but nobody seems to care about that in any sense. And that could be a stretch. But my point is just that when you're meeting for some kind of level of negotiation and peace, there should be some level of decorum for honest people in the world. And if you want to go but it's war, Ryan, well, then you're not an honest person in the world. Just own that, okay? You're not part of the grouping of people that want to have some kind of level of, normalcy where we can engage with our adversaries on a level playing field to discuss things. If you don't actually want to have peace with people around the world in any context, then you're not the end. You're the problem in the conversation. Trump and his team and Biden and his team, they're the problem in the conversation. They're war bonkers. They're maintaining the state of war for their benefit and somehow convincing you that means you're strong. Keep listening to Stephen Miller. He'll drive you right into the ground. Iran dismisses Trump's unilateral ceasefire extension as a ploy, saying Tehran never asked for it. Now, guys, this had to be really, it depends again whether he's being lied to. And whether he even sees this or whether he's told it's a bunch of fake news from CNN, I don't know. But if he isn't, or that's not the case, he must be very upset about this because this is really embarrassing. So he gives them an extension on the ceasefire in hopes that'll just be accepted or whatever, or not engaged with. And they come out and go, we don't even care about that. We don't respect your ceasefire or your extension of whatever. And it's like, that's a position of power, whether it's faked or not. And it shows weakness from Trump's side when that's the case. Now, it says Iran reacted with skepticism to Donald Trump's unilateral declaration of ceasefire, even as he claimed he'd bomb them all to hell if they didn't make a deal. Weak. Describing it as a ploy, and said Trump never asked for it. Or Tehran, never asked for it. Arghachi, Iran's foreign minister, said Tehran had not requested ceasefire extension or new negotiations under the shadow of threats, which is pretty, think about the statement. We didn't even ask for it. We don't want more negotiations. We don't want a ceasefire, right? Because what that shows you is that what they're doing, they can do indefinitely, and they could be lying about that. I don't think they are. I think they planned for this, like anybody who could see coming had been talking about this for years. And now they're willing to last it out because, like I said, as we'll get to in one more second about the mine point, they did not shut down the strait. They did not mine the strait. That's my opinion, but I think it's backed up every day by the fact that you can see tons of ships going through, not the tankers necessarily. They go through special routes. I think they all do at this point, but look at all the traffic. Are you going to tell me that there's mines all over and there's fishing boats that go around? I mean, come on, guys. That seems insanely stupid to me. It's obviously possible. They have them and they could. I don't think it's the case. From the very beginning, I think they expected Iran to shut down the strait, and that's why they yelled that narrative and have maintained it ever since, because they need the world to support them. But Iran instead said, guess what, guys? Just you. We're going to stop you from going through and affect your economy. You've given us that power. Thank you. That's what it felt like. And that's why Trump and the rest were so desperate to do that. Now they've threatened mines even today. They've talked about, insurance elements or coordination or basically attacks on NATO, all these conversations and strong arming and tactics for stopping people from going through, whether by fear or because they didn't want to challenge Trump's agenda. And that in effect is what caused largely the most of the shutdown, not actually Iran saying just the Zionists in Israel and the United States can't come through. And again, back to the point of seeing how many have come through during their blockade anyway. Arghachi condemned the ongoing U.S. naval blockade of Iran's ports as an act of war. I mean, in a ceasefire, it's exactly what it was. Now, regardless of what you think, realize that when they started that last ceasefire, everything else, again, aside from Israel bombing Lebanon, which, by the way, never seems to stop, which probably still would have been a violation. But if you stand back aside from that, everything else went back the way that it was supposed to, except Trump's blockade. So had he done that, they could have arguably had some level of ceasefire. There's no misunderstanding that. There's not like Iran did any of the things Trump was claiming before he did his blockade. He did that, and then Iran said, okay, fine. It was like 12 hours later, they said, well, this is now a violation. Same with Lebanon, because you're still bombing Lebanon. We're going to go right back to where we were. And then Trump just went on acting like everything was good, ceasefire's in place. And then when they engaged with one of those ships, they said, oh, they violated the ceasefire. They did not. This is very basic, guys. This is not taking a side. It's acknowledging the facts on the table, guys. And it says, and a violation, basically saying that Iran knows how to resist bullying. Mohammadi, senior advisor for the parliament speaker, Ghalibaf, dismissed the ceasefire extension, saying it means nothing and has no real value from Iran's perspective. That's what I mean. He characterized the move as a tactic to gain time for a surprise strike. Or it could be they just were trying to get some kind of level ending point where they can pretend they won and just leave it alone. Hard to say, right? Or a surprise strike would be what I would expect, one of those two things. And argued that a side facing such pressure cannot set the terms. Iran's ambassador to the UN emphasized that ending the naval blockade remains a non-negotiable condition, which, by the way, they said from the beginning. So basically saying that as long as you maintain that blockade, there's nothing's going to happen. Now, again, they have always shown restraint and always shown their ability to engage with some kind of negotiation. Whether you think that's some terrorist tactic or not, it is the reality. The point, maybe they'll just go, okay, we'll come back and talk. But I think the point would still be that it's about them eventually getting what they want to demonstrate that they ultimately work this the way they could. And it's in their interest to work this and through the deals, even though they know every moment they are going to try to assassinate them, which is kind of why I think it's impossible at this point. It doesn't make any sense for them to continue to engage with what the U.S. and Israel are doing. And I think that's kind of where I would expect it to go. But last time they surprised me too, where they would just stay here and say, unless you stop bombing Lebanon, unless you agree, stop the blockade and agree through the UN to effectively stop all of it, we're not doing this anymore. That's kind of where I think this has gotten to. And it says Trump claimed the extension was partly due to the Iranian government being seriously fractured, a narrative Iranian officials have dismissed while maintaining their own 10-point plan for permanent peace. It said Trump was forced to unilaterally announce a ceasefire extension despite having previously openly emphasized that he would not extend the ceasefire under any circumstances and that Iran must participate in the talks or he would, end their civilization and then extend the ceasefire. Trump has announced on Tuesday that the U.S. representatives were heading to Pakistan for negotiations. This was 2 days ago. And that if Iran did not agree, war would resume, and then didn't do that. I mean, like every single time. However, Iranian officials maintained silence, announcing no official position regarding participating or not. You got to think that they respect that power move right there, right? I mean, the idea that, again, it's not a move, in my opinion. It would be if they were lying about it. This is them demonstrating that they're not worried about this. They're not even announcing what they're like. As it says, Trump says we're doing this, and they, meeting them. We're on the way, he says. They're going to meet us there. And they didn't even announce a position about whether they're going to go or not. They emphasized the U.S. has violated the ceasefire. And they went. Nobody was there. Another semi-official news agency, Tasnim, quoted unidentified officials, also said Iran had not requested extension of the ceasefire, and Trump's announcement could have several meanings. One, the first meaning is that Trump has lost the war and has tested and implemented all possible scenarios during the war. It said Trump knows he will achieve nothing through war, so he considers exiting the war as a best possible way for himself. That's kind of what I think one of the most logical ways here. Even if he continues the war, he will not achieve anything. And this is why I worry about some kind of element, which I don't think Trump is the one, personally. You may disagree, but another element that would drive this over the top. I think Trump's being used largely. I don't think Trump is your friend or truly is fighting for this country, but I don't believe he is blindly in the interest of the agenda against his own legacy or against what, you thinking he saved the country. I think that matters a lot to him. But it says Tasnim said that although the war has no achievement for Trump or for the U.S., Trump may do everything, including deception, through every possible means, among them the extension of the ceasefire. Trump made claim to extend the ceasefire, but then the same administration of the United States or Israel may carry out terrorist moves. And again, you can call it terrorist moves, or you can simply say illegal bombings. Kind of equivalent for whatever the U.S. and Israel say. And, anything that anybody does against them, whether legal or not, it's a terrorist attack. The point is that they're bombing still. The blockade's still happening. Israel's still bombing in or Iran, by the way. So those are carried out attacks during a supposed ceasefire. That's what they're pointing out. And then everyone goes, well, like in Lebanon, 300 dead during this, and the ceasefire is maintained or whatever they've been selling in Lebanon for the last year. Well, that means there's not a ceasefire if Israel's murdering Lebanese, but it doesn't matter. It's only a violation when the other side acts, just like with Yemen and Saudi Arabia, as I covered for years. It said the U.S. will withdraw from the war and Israel will remain in the war under the pretext of the violation of the ceasefire in Lebanon. Exactly. See, they know, they're not stupid. And as I've said from the very beginning, that was going on before this started. It will not stop regardless of what Trump does. That's very clear, as they didn't even give them a moment, even during the fake momentary ceasefire, Israel still bombed Lebanon. This is insanely obvious. And so that will continue, and Iran's not going to allow it to happen. If they continue doing that, Israel's not going to stop. The question is, will the U.S. reign in Israel? I don't even think that's possible right now. It said the U.S. will withdraw on the war. And it says, however, Americans have previously been warned that the U.S. cannot unilaterally escape from the war and keep Israel in the fight. That's an important statement. What it's saying is, Trump, don't pretend like you can just back away from this if Israel's still fighting. If Israel is still fighting in Lebanon or Iran, either or, you are still in this war. You have been committed because of what you've been doing. And that's a fair statement. You don't get to back away and let Israel keep doing it. At the end of the day, same thing with Gaza. You guys are genocidal actors in all of this. You are belligerents, legally speaking. So that then puts Trump in a much different position because he then can't just kind of back away and make a narrative and act like he's out of it because they'll keep bombing. They'll keep attacking. I take that back because I think what they've largely done is responsive, but I think what we would see is the continuation of the control of the strait against U.S. and Israeli interests. I think that's important to think about. Now, you could argue that would be a crime, but it only in a context where they weren't under a legal war, right? They started a legal war. They're murdering their people. They're assassinating and bombing, and that's why that's a response. It wouldn't have been happening based on the history had they not started the illegal war. Pretty simple. Continued naval blockade means continued hostilities. Iran will not open the Strait of Hormuz, at least as long as the naval blockade remains in place, and will break the blockade by force if necessary. Now, as of the moment, there's, again, as of like tomorrow, it'll be easier to look today about whether or not they're still letting through other people through the Strait. Last I checked, the argument was sort of like, well, if you coordinate with us and go through the routes that we've allotted and we escort you through, then anybody other than them can come through. And as I said, there have been tankers both going directly to Iranian ports and others who have made it through, despite what Trump is saying he's doing, and in some cases actually stopping. So you decide what you think that all means. Clearly, we're being misled in a lot of ways. Ghalibaf, remember the one that Israel said, and it was Israel, it came from their media, said that Ghalibaf was the one that Trump was working with. Again, now look at back where we are now. I think they were trying to get him killed. I think they were trying to get them to react and think he was a traitor because he was important to their team. I'm serious. I mean, I can't know for sure, but think about this. How did it end up? They were telling you he's secretly working with a defector. They sent oil through the strait to give us a gift. It didn't happen. So was Trump lied to? That's pretty embarrassing. Or was he lying to you? At the end of the day, Ghalibaf, so far at least, is not a defector. And he stands up and says, ceasefire extension means nothing. As we just told you, the losing side cannot dictate terms. That's going to frustrate some of them. Jeremy Scahill pointing to Caroline Leavitt saying, the legacy media is doing PR for the Iranian regime again. The truth is that Trump's leadership and the U.S. military decimated their capabilities in just 38 days. Clearly, because it's all over, right? Iran's defense industry base was almost completely destroyed. I mean, it's just funny, right? His point makes it clear what she's doing. He says, Jeremy Scahill says, when you're winning decisively, it's often necessary to constantly remind the public that you're winning, right? It's an underrated aspect of true victory. The need to really make sure people understand that you are the winner. This has been true in all of history's great wars, right? I mean, it's just painfully dumb. And she's just doing her job badly, but they all do it. Caroline or KJP, whatever Trump said is a thing. End of the day, guys, they're not in the position they're claiming. That's objectively clear. Whether Iran is winning, it's hard to say. Clearly that they're in a better position than Trump was saying, and Trump's continued failures and lies seems to suggest that, but I'm not going to say I know that, but what we can see without question, guys, is it is not the way they're framing it. And as I said before, Trump tells MSN now Iran has no idea who their leader is. They're all messed up, he said, and they have no idea who their leader is. They do. It's very easy to recognize. I mean, here's what's painful about this. They're negotiating with a government. That government has a leader. They all agree on that. No one's confused about that. No one's even saying this outside of Trump's thing. So is he being lied to, or is he just lying because he's desperate? He says, we took out really 3 levels of leaders and everybody that were even close behind him. You mean other than his son, which was right behind him? You can't, anyway, it says he added that the country's Navy and Air Force have been wiped out, a claim he's made often since the war began. Aside from those Navy ships from Iran that just took other ships, other than that, right? And it says, quote, they're really a mess. And now nobody wants to help them because they no longer have the fear factor. What's that? Based on what? You mean like occupying foreign countries and destabilizing their economies and bombing and murdering innocent people and raping children? Oh, no, that's what you guys are doing. Explain to me again what Iran is doing. It's even, again, as always, you want to point to what they claim, most of which are lies. Compare it to what you can prove they're doing, U.S. and Israel. It doesn't even compare. They're no longer the bully of the Middle East. I mean, seriously? In what world has Iran been the bully of anything in this conversation? Look around what's been going on. But again, that argument works for objective people who are not blinded by partisanship or government sycophants. Because I mean that whether Biden or Trump, some people just go, the U.S. no matter what, even though the government's lying to you. Just as dumb to me. U.S. to shoot and kill Iranian boats laying mines, but I thought you just said their Navy was gone. That's funny. That's why in his tweet he goes, but the small boats. It's like, great save. But there's a backspace, by the way. But shoot and kill. Okay, so you're in a supposed ceasefire, which you say they violated. You say you want to meet for negotiations, but then they don't. So you go, we're going to kill things, which is perfectly Trump. Which who knows whether they even do it. And if they do, why is that justified? Okay, we're back at war now, which was never really the case. It's not a war though, but it is. End of the day, what is it really about? President Trump said he ordered the Navy to shoot and kill any boats laying mines. I'm telling you guys, it's lazy. Again, I could be wrong. You understand, if you do your due diligence, there is not a single shred of evidence, not a picture, nothing, not Iran claiming it, other than the idea that it's possible. And Trump saying for the first time, I made a point about it. He came out and said, they better not put mines in the strait. They haven't yet. Weirdly, he said that, but they better not. And then like later that day, reports of mines in the strait. It's just bad propaganda, guys. So my mind is, and the reason I think it didn't happen, even though they could and have, is because they didn't want to shut the strait down because they called their bluff. They saw very plainly what Trump and Netanyahu were trying to do and didn't shut the strait down. That's my opinion. And again, they didn't. You can prove that. It was restricted from the beginning, but it was never shut down. And he goes, we ordered them to kill the boats that are laying mines. What does that do? Well, it causes the random tanker to go, whoa, I'm not going to go through there, and shut down the flow of oil. That hurts your gas prices and hurts your resources. Is Iran doing that? No, that's what they're doing. I find that very revealing. And again, back to the larger point about whether there's some kind of a transition of power flow, you should ask whether, they're the ones that are maintaining the blockade, not Iran, not really. And it says, quote, I have ordered the United States Navy to shoot and kill any boat. Small boats, though, they may be. Their naval ships are all gone. They're not, though. They literally just took a ship, whatever. And says that is putting mines in the waters of the Strait of Hormuz. There is to be no hesitation. Trump wrote, okay, as if like he's giving an order directly from True Social. He's doing this for your purpose, guys. It's so bad. You don't need to write that. He's trying to act tough and strong, and I'm directing the military, when probably not even what's going on, quite frankly. He says, additionally, our minesweepers are clearing the strait now. I'm hereby ordering the activity to continue, but at triple up level. Okay. So now you're removing the mines that you said they did already, that you told us they were sweeping, and that it just every day, it never stops. I'd love it. I'd love an image. Show me an image of one of these things you're taking out. How much you want to bet it's going to be a grainy image like limpet mines of the Bolton time, if it even comes out at all. And again, let's not forget that you can literally see, let's refresh, because it is different. It's live map, ships traversing, going through the strait. Yeah, it's just kind of down here. Let's check the tanker view, see where those are. Remember, the all ship view is what everybody was showing before. Remember all that big talk about everybody going to the U.S.? Funny how that just didn't go anywhere because they were all lying to you. Yeah, still. So right now, I would argue that the majority of these are stuck, many of which are not close enough, many of which... Oh, wait, why is it doing that? Whoa, hold on. Stupid thing. Hold on. Damn it, what is going on? I don't know why that would happen. So the point is to look at some of these tankers. There you go. And see what they are. There's a U.S. one. Plenty of these aren't necessarily adversarial with Iran. And so I would argue that they would be able to go through if it wasn't for what the U.S. government was doing. In fact, I think that's been verified. Trump claims U.S. has total control over the Strait of Hormuz. Oh, yeah. Well, let's take a look back. Does that look like total control? Why do you do this to yourself, Trump? Why do you continue to make these statements after Iran seizes 2 container ships, with the Navy that they totally don't have? Now, we're not talking about speedboats taking massive ships. You can clearly show that they have naval ships. And Robert made that point. As Iran, before this all kicked off, had videos showing that they were putting ships under caverns because they knew where this was going to go. Now it says, Donald Trump again said the U.S. has total control over the Strait of Hormuz, adding that Iran's leadership was so hobbled by the infighting that it was unclear who's in charge. Wait, they're collapsing within, and we have total control, but we're going to go ahead and give them time to come to an agreement and gain their power back before we actually do something about it. Does any honest person believe that? But the U.S. president's claims seemed questionable in the face of the seizure of 2 container ships by Iran's commandos and a U.S. report warning it could take 6 months to clear the Straits of Mines. Right. A U.S. report about mines that I've yet to see that Iran never claimed they put out there. I'm telling you guys, it's pretty obvious. While U.S. forces have proved capable of stopping ships coming out of Iran ports, they have still not demonstrated the capacity to open the strait to vessels coming from ports in allied Gulf states. Aha. So basically, they have not actually taken control. And the impact of the dual blockades has been compounded by the presence of sea mines in the strait. Thank you, Guardian, for just blindly repeating what Trump keeps saying as you're questioning other things he says. Why? Because the system has an interest in that narrative. My opinion, decide for yourself. I mean, why would you be going, Trump's this and wrong and lying and Trump's the bad guy, and then blindly state what only he has said publicly? And it says, in a briefing in Congress, the Pentagon warned it could take up to 6 months to clear all suspected mines. This was before. Okay. The point is, this has been a long-term conversation of the possibility that they have mines and they have, all these different things. That's what we're talking about. I mean, watch as this goes forward and we look back a year later, and as many things that we do on this platform, that important part of it that we realized, like in the midst of it happening, that becomes like the talking point way later, rarely gets acknowledged for that insight of the time, which was that I think this is the case based on the evidence, not because we can prove it. And that when we come to pass and later find out that it was something that they coordinated, that Israel put out, it's important to recognize that. It was deducted during the information, and I think it's based on what we can, historical precedents, what we know they're capable of, but not that we can prove it. That's very important. And I would argue neither can they. And I think that's really important in the sense of what's currently happening. Honestly, I still go back to this, and I don't know how in the world we can argue that all these ships would be able to just go through without, with mines all across the strait. A Pentagon spokesperson described the report as inaccurate, but did not provide specific objections. Sorry, let me read that again because that's important for the flow through. The Pentagon's warning suggested that the impact of the war on the global economy could linger long after any peace deal was agreed. And again, the larger conversation of the mines and hard to locate, the Pentagon spokesperson described the report of all that they were just discussing. The report said approximately 20 mines right there. To make sure we're on the same page, right? A Pentagon spokesman described that report as inaccurate, but did not provide specifics. There you go. So the inaccurate report is about the mines in the strait. Telling you guys, demonstrating our value. Okay. 34 Iran tankers slipped past U.S. blockade. $900 million in oil. Was that on purpose? Is there more going on? Is there coordination happening? We should ask that. I don't think so. It doesn't seem to make sense to me with all we can see. But if that's not the case, then this is an ineffectual effort. They're failing in what they're trying to accomplish based on what they say they're trying to do. Why is that not across the entire conversation? Well, because we live in a broken media apparatus that does not actually report the facts when they're restricted from doing so. But here's, anyway, this guy's voice just always cracks me up. Besant. The Iranian regime must be held accountable for its extortion of global energy markets and indiscriminate targeting of civilians with missiles and drones. I mean, it's wild to me how this keeps being like that. This person can, I guess what else are they going to do, right? You're not going to just come out and go, yeah, you got us, we're lying. I mean, the idea that you guys can just deliberately start with bombing a girls' school, 168, 175, depending on who you listen to, innocent children that Pegseth showed you their bombing map, which was right in the middle. And they've never even apologized for that. And they've bombed schools and hospitals and triple taps on ambulances, and then ambulances after that who come to stop a bomb. I mean, this is on the surface. Iran, as best I can tell, has not targeted any deliberate civilian locations outside of ones that even I would borderline criticize, like, for example, in Israel, where Israel deliberately puts its headquarters underneath the center of Tel Aviv. And even John the Israeli Zionist former military guy who goes on the shows, the Piers Morgan, he admitted, yes, that makes it a military target. I would still argue that no matter what they do, you just don't bomb locations packed with civilians. That makes them the bad guy. Don't become the bad guy in response to their illegal actions. So my point in saying all that, though, is there's a couple examples you could make. Almost everything you can point to that Iran attacked, even like the Oracle stuff, those are military targets based on everything that we can see, literally involved with the military agenda. So in the other side of this, guys, they're bombing downtown Beirut, bombing in the middle of Tehran on video because everyone's filming. And this guy has the nerve to come out and say they're bombing civilian targets as Israel is literally destroying entire civilizations right now. And on top of that, the extortion of the global energy markets. You mean the open strait that you guys shut down with your illegal war? I mean, to be fair, that Iran restricted for you when you started the illegal war and then you fully blocked with all of your propaganda. I mean, either way you look at this, even if Iran blocked it entirely, it was because of your illegal actions. Illegal, period. There is no second thought on that, guys. And this is their argument to say that they must be held accountable for what we're doing. Guys, well, doesn't that just sum it up? That's exactly what they've been doing with Iran, whether you think Iran are bad guys or not, our entire lives. They're doing the thing. They're state sponsor of terrorism, as you guys quite obviously fund pretty much every radical group in the world. I mean, we're now breaking down the SPLC argument. It's only them, and it's the one side of the group, when really what you're tapping into is exactly that point. Funding of terrorism, funding of extremist groups, all of our government for the purpose of regime change, occupation, political manipulation. Under POTUS's leadership as part of the economic fury, Treasury will continue to flow the money and target the Iranian regime's recklessness of those who enabled it. Exhausting. Well, what you get is people like that. Ridiculous, just whole cloth lies, and literally the opposite of what's happening half the time. And huge accounts like the Quartering, who are very mainstream, who don't really understand what's happening, in my opinion, come out and say Iran has not honored the most important aspect of the ceasefire. Of course, this after Trump's illegal blockade that never stopped, or the bombing of Lebanon that continued well before what are you about to say. But it says keeping the Strait of Hormuz open. Okay, you mean when they did, while Trump blockaded and they bombed Lebanon, and it was there for hours, they were open, but they kept it, so that's why I went back to closing. Now, I forgive you, Coring, for not knowing that because you're tapped into CNN, Fox News, corporate media, whatever else, or whatever you're tapped into. It's definitely not the moment-to-moment information that you can clearly see showed that they were calling out Trump's blockade, trying to get him to stop it, saying that's a violation. If you don't stop that, this will discontinue. And then they didn't stop it. So that's when it went away. All right. I mean, it's just sad, though. There's so many of these massive accounts who knows, maybe they think they're right. I think that's a lot of this today. But also that it was open before this started. It's just frustrating. But it's been the world's most expensive game of red light, green light. Well, again, not really, if you actually know what you're talking about, because there's been ships that have been going through, that they've allowed through, that they have actually stopped. They being Iran in the first case, they being the U.S. and Israel have made sure weren't going through, even though they would have been able to. It says, we even got Israel to stop blowing up Hezbollah. Seriously? You see what I mean? It pains me. You mean while they kept bombing Lebanon, which is Hezbollah or Lebanon in general, bombing the middle of Tehran, or rather Lebanon, Beirut, and many other locations, while this was happening, Israel, I proved to you, I covered it the day it started, was bombing Lebanon. Al Jazeera and others on the ground literally called it out. Do not extend the ceasefire. No more BS. And then Trump goes, forever ceasefire, because they're confused. And then they go, yeah, the thing, Trump's the guy, whatever. I mean, I'm happily making fun of him, but these people just carry on with support for the team. It kills me. Jacob, not familiar with, follow him now. Actually, no, I think I am actually. Oh, yeah. No, I take it back. I remember this guy now. I follow him. And now it says, if only Iran had not closed the strait in the first place, the war wouldn't have happened. He goes, oh, wait, it was open before and they closed it after America and Israel attacked them unprovoked. Weird. Almost like this war was chosen and not necessary. Exactly. And then on the 22nd, Raw News Alerts comes out and says, breaking news, Donald Trump is expected to finalize the deal with Iran on Sunday. Or not at all. And Iran's like, you're ridiculous. But this is what you get. These people just go, the thing Trump said. And now, slightly different for one of these kind of like alerts that just literally just repeat what's being said. It's kind of different because they just repeat whatever things come out. Same though. This then gets parroted by others who think that's the reality, right? It becomes every headline of every news channel that says expected by, and the markets get manipulated because of it. And as this person laughs at down here, March 3rd, March 3rd, we won the war. March 7th, we defeated Iran. March 9th, we must attack Iran. March 9th, the war is ending very beautifully. March 10th, practically nothing left to target. March 11th, you never like to say early you won. We won. March 12th, we did win, but we did not completely yet. March 13th, we won the war. March 14th, these are real, by the way. March 14th, please help us. And that's like NATO and whatever else. And I guess I'd argue that's kind of paraphrased actually, but March 15th, if you don't help us, I'll remember it. That's NATO again. March 16th, actually, we don't need any help at all. These are generally real statements. March 16th, I was just testing who's listening. March 16th, if NATO doesn't help, they will suffer. March 17th, we neither need nor want NATO's help. March 18th, allies must cooperate in reopening Hormuz. March 19th, U.S. allies need to get a grip. March 20th, NATO is cowards. March 21st, Hormuz, we don't use it. No need to open it. March 22nd, this is the last time I will give Iran 48 hours. March 22nd, Iran is dead. March 27th, talks have to be there. What is that? Talk isn't, I'm not sure what that one says. March 39th, or March 39th. That's got to be 29th. Hormuz, immediately or consequences. Open Hormuz. March 31st, deal very close. Iran will do the right thing. This is where I find it gets embarrassing. April 1st, we'll see what happens very soon. April 2nd, deal likely, strikes if not. That keeps happening. April 4th, Iran must comply immediately. April 5th, open the strait. Yes, remember that. He did effing straight, you crazy BS TRDs. A whole civilization will die on April 6th. April 7th, we have an agreement. They did not. April 8th, there is no agreement. Fake news. April 9th, JD is in Pakistan. April 10th, JD is not in Pakistan. April 11th, still blockading the strait. April 12th, lifting sanctions. It's ongoing stupidity. The point is constantly saying, and in between each one of those, they're begging for a deal. They're so weak. They don't understand. We won already. Yeah, here we are. And this is what it came down to. Here, actually, I'll grab this. I added this late. Let's grab this so you can listen to it. And this is what gets this is what I was saying before is like, if he is aware of all this, right? And he sees what's happening. He could see that these things keep not panning out, whether he's being lied to or he lied to you, and then you eventually see it. Why would you not at some point be like, I'm going to make up a better lie, right? I'm going to somehow, whatever it may be, twist something into it to where it may, so at least it can last longer than until Iran goes, that's not true. I don't understand it. Now it becomes basically, give me time. Vietnam lasted forever.
On the war with Iran, how long are you willing to wait until you get a unified response?
Don't rush me, Jeff. Guys like you want to say, oh, so we were in Vietnam like for 18 years. We were in Iraq for many, many years. We're in for all the, I don't like to say World War II because that was a biggie. But we were 4.5, almost 5 years in World War II.
You don't like to say World War II because what? Just weird. And don't you got to love that, like, they go, people like you, like that's a very weirdly immature thing to do in the Oval Office. Like where you just kind of like people like you just go, oh, you talk about whatever. Like it's just very, very weird. I think it shows, if you're composed and you're not concerned, you're not winning, you don't respond like that. Like it's all clearly my opinion, but 3 days, it would be over in 3 days. And now the mere mention of how it might go longer is like, you're just, that's when you get the Pete Hegseth screaming at reporters or, they're defensive. And that shows you very clearly where they are.
We were in the Korean War for 7 years. I've been doing this for 6 weeks.
Yeah. Give me a few years. Shut up. Right. Get off my back. It's not like I made any promises or anything, right?
And their military is totally defeated. They're
okay.
Outside of the little wise guy ships. I call them the wise guy ships.
Oh, do you? The wise guy ships. I bet you made that up right there.
Little boats that they have running around with guns in them. We'll take them out too when we see them. 6 weeks. And their military is totally defeated. They're outside of the little wise guy ships. I call them the wise guy ships.
How much you want to bet? Just totally guessing. Find me another example in history of Trump ever using that term. I bet you don't find it. Just So utterly ridiculous. But who knows? That's what I think a sociopath truly does. And I mean that. Like, it's just like this. Yeah, it's like anyway, I mean, it's not even worth going further into. It's my opinion. I just think it's whatever that was is weird, guys. And it's the whole thing. I mean, and the idea that so 3 days, anybody saying it was going to be a long war, forever war, they laughed at you. They literally laughed in your face and said, you guys are such fake news. And here we are where we're well past that point. And now you bring it up and you get laughed at. Fake news for saying, God, what Vietnam was 18 years. Shut up. Nobody honest is on this side, guys. I just don't know how in the world that's possible. If people who are honest are still supporting what is literally the opposite of everything you wanted, then I don't know why I'm doing this. I shouldn't even say it like that. I'd say if the majority of honest people are doing that. I don't believe it. I just don't. Here, I'll make sure I finish
They
that.
have running around. The Wise Guy ships, the little boats that they have running around with guns in them. And we'll take them out too when we see them.
All right. So to finish, just make sure you understand. By the way, I didn't have the tweet, or the antiwararticle.com, or anti-war article, in fact, but I think it was Dave DeCamp, if I remember correctly, but antiwar.com article, 58, I believe, it's off the top of my head, but over 50 times this administration has bombed Somalia. Funny how that just doesn't matter, that in many people's minds, like, that's not a peace president, guys. That's just ongoing warfare, and Somaliland and the Israel connection is not a secret, but that's just only one part of it. None of this is justifiable. None of this. I mean, the groups that they're claim they're fighting are groups that they're responsible for creating. It's basically everywhere in the world. In fact, connects weirdly back to the Southern Poverty Law Center conversation and shows you that this is a thing that the government does. It literally creates, manufactures, and funds the very things it claims it's fighting. ISIS, Al-Qaeda, it is what they do. And if you want to somehow carve that out to one side of the paradigm, I'm telling you guys, you are the problem in this conversation. You're the reason that what you're calling out will never change. I hope at least you can think about what I'm saying. So my point is, Somalia, elsewhere, Lebanon. Because Lebanon, by the way, was part of the supposed ceasefire. I told you they never stopped, and now they're just continuing. And again, the reality was they never truly stopped. They were doing other forms of their operations in the moments when they weren't bombing. And those were also violations. And this has been called out. I mean, in Lebanon, they've now pushed well beyond the blue line to a new line. If you don't remember what that was, this is the old demarcation line from the previous ceasefire from decades ago that they broke a long time ago. And now they've just pushed the line further. Now it's a new line until we can stop the war and then pull back. But they never do. The point is to pretend that's the reality, always cry foul on the other side, and take the territory. It's what they do everywhere. And so here we are, 22nd. Follow this account. I don't want to mispronounce her name, Makurat Atala, in Lebanon, on the ground. Question or two, just like anybody else. A destroyed school, water station, playground, and mosque. This is some of the destruction we saw. A village that has been completely flattened by Israel. They posted their own videos of taking out entire cities with one massive explosion. Towns, rather. It's a crime, no matter how you spin it, like everything else they seem to be doing. A village that has been completely flattened by Israel, like many villages across the Deep South. The very same locations that Apple just happened to remove the names from. Total coincidence, right? The same locations that Smotrich and Ben-Gvir have maps with Hebrew names for their settlements. Total coincidence, though, right, guys? We've been working on a full package on Israel's buffer zone doctrine in Lebanon, she writes for the National News, based on several reporting tips near the so-called Yellow Line, a belt of dozens of villages stretching roughly 5 to 7 kilometers from the border with Israel. And, of course, Francesca Albanese, human rights groups, UN investigators, and Israeli legal organizations say the torture and sexual abuse of Palestinian detainees in Israel's prisons is part of a wider system of oppression. We know this. This content may be distressing to some. It's only 3 minutes. You should watch it for yourself. I mean, the reality, for example, which may shock somebody, it may shock somebody, and I guarantee somebody will deny, even though it's been publicly admitted by their own media, by the IDF, training dogs to rape prisoners. That said, Tiemann, guys, they went on TV promoting the idea that they should have the right to rape Palestinians. Again, it's amazing. I get why that may sound insane to somebody who's never even seen that. It's literally live Israeli mainstream TV. And we covered it at the time. Of course, it was distracted and deflected, and Twitter algorithmically channeled everybody away from it, the normal today. But the reality cannot be denied. You can choose to ignore it, but the evidence is there. And this is what they've been doing while screaming rape about everything. I mean, remember what happened with October 7th. That didn't happen. Who's to say whether, I'm not going to say Hamas is not capable of that or they haven't done it in the past. The reality is it did not happen here by the evidence that we have. The woman in the gray pants they used as the billboard came home and said she wasn't raped. And it turned out that her bleeding ankle was reason that she had blood on the back of her pants, like a lot of us said. Damn them for making us have to go through that, having to, painstakingly push back on such a terrible claim because the evidence didn't back it up. Even the UN ultimately concluded the same thing, and they keep lying about that. And sadly, a lot of honest people still think that they're wrong, still think we're making that up. Haaretz, drop site news reports, Israeli soldiers looting homes across southern Lebanon on a crazy scale. Soldiers and commanders stationed inside Lebanon told the outlet. We have examples of them harvesting their vegetables and cooking food in their kitchens. Gee, sounds familiar, doesn't it? Sounds like another Gaza, because that's literally what this is. They're looting their homes like crazy all across Lebanon because either they have no control over these monsters or the Israeli government trains them to do this. According to the testimonies, as IDF soldiers leave Lebanon, they load stolen items onto their vehicles openly without attempting to conceal them. It's on a crazy scale, one soldier said. Anyone who takes something, television, cigarettes, tools, whatever, immediately puts it in their vehicle or leaves it off to the side. Not inside the army base, but it's not hidden. Everyone sees and understands. Witnesses describe troops taking motorcycles, televisions, tools, painting sofas, rugs. Shouldn't be that hard for you to recognize why, let's say, ICE will steal the cars of people that they arrest. Multiple examples of that, by the way. Now, I'm making a connection where there's not one that needs to be made, but I think there's a reason for you to see all of this is interconnected. And I'm not even just talking about Israel, mind you. I'm talking about the mentality, the ideology of the kind of people that we're dealing with from a globalist perspective, but specifically as well. You can't miss the overlaps. Trump announces 3-week Lebanon ceasefire extension. Okay. What does that matter? Well, Israel's literally bombing Lebanon as we speak. Now, arguably today, I haven't seen any examples of bombings, but like I said, they're still illegally occupying territory. They're still seizing homes and raiding, raping, and everything else they always do, guys. All of those reports are coming out. So for him to yell this means nothing, just like Iran said. It's insane that you can even pretend there's a ceasefire while the last alleged ceasefire was violated thousands of times by Israel by everyone's account, and even this momentary ceasefire was violated the day it started. These are monsters, guys. These are bad people. Now, lastly, you need to translate this, but this is important for you to understand. And this is you could check it for yourself because this has been stated many times. Many times this has been presented. This is Khamenei, the one that was killed. The point is, I've tried to tell you this many times over the years, and I know many of you already understand this. And of course, you could argue they're lying, just like you could argue they're lying about anything. Evidence backs it up. Iran's former supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, explains to the Iranian youth what the slogan "Death to America" stands for. What the mainstream media will misrepresent, so listen to what this sentence stands for. The bottom line is, I've told you many times over the years, it does not represent Americans. It is an empire. It is an ideology. It is something that they're fighting that overlaps with Zionism. But see, Zionism does not mean Israel necessarily. But there is an overlap, you understand, because it represents the empire of Zionism, just like right now, America represents the empire that they're trying to stop, that many Americans are trying to stop. That doesn't mean hating America, you understand? That's the illusion. So what he's highlighting is the same kind of thing, is that wherever you are, whatever you believe, and you don't have to say the same thing. The point is there's a language translation issue is really the point. It comes down to, it's sort of like when you look at the translation, historically, even Hamas was saying sort of like death to the Jews. But when you do the translation, it simply equates to the word that Israel used to describe them in a general sense. So they're saying what Israel says they are. But then as it goes forward, they update their charters and they make it clear Zionism is what we're fighting. Now, again, you could say they're lying and that they just tried to hide the truth. But look at where we are today. Look at the facts back this up. Because, I'm not saying good person. I mean, in fact, I strongly disagree with the way they framed him or Soleimani, but who's to say? But I am saying that what they say about these people is wrong. They lie about them. In this case, all of Iranian society or all of their government is about trying to stop the thing that has been hell-bent on destroying them my entire life at the very least. And it's just important to understand that, guys. So we'll leave it there for today. Thank you for tuning in. I think this stuff is very important. So much nuance. I get it. It's hard to, especially for those that, you have limited time. It takes a long show to discuss this. I mean, you could just go over the headlines, understand these things, but obviously the reason that we do the show the way we do is because I find it to be not just important, but paramount to not just be able to recite even the correct thing that I would see as the correct statement, but to understand why that is the statement, to be able to articulate to somebody else why that's the statement, and to break down the inner workings of how that even came to be. Like, that's important. That's being educated on it, not just reciting, repeating. Our whole society seems to be like that, right? Doctors, you feel this way, here's a pill, as opposed to being able to break it down and understand and try different, that's how it used to be. Everything goes that way, it seems. It's all being binary and obfuscated. In any case, the point is, I know that's why you're here. I appreciate it. For those that are new, we strive to be objective in every possible way we can. As Steve jokingly calls it, I called it irritating. He calls it nightmarishly objective. Either way, I take it. That is the highest praise to me. Not that I think it should be necessary in a time when we're not drowning in propaganda, that maybe you can be a little bit more open or assumptive, if you will. But when we're at a point where we are buried in it, like overwhelming, lying about things that you don't even need to lie about, it behooves you to be irritatingly objective. So think about that. So thank you for tuning in today. I love you all. Unfortunately, it looks like tomorrow, I didn't get into it today when we started the show, but those that watch regularly, I've been dealing with some personal stuff on the side that just has been very difficult for me to keep this going. But again, we're real people. You see, we don't have a team of 50 people and other things to stand in. It's just me back here, in regard to the show and the work and the prep, other than amazing people around us like Orwell in the chat and Katie who send things to me, right? But I mean, in the sense that what I do in this side of it and live here, it's just me, and so ultimately life happens and sometimes that's the case. But I know you guys understand. My point to say all that is just that, they're real people, unlike some of the more constructs out there. But anyway, the point is that soon get stuff behind me. We'll right back on track. Just keep doing the work, But my point is that tomorrow's up in the air. Just keep you guys informed. I'm going to do my best to get some level of really, what I've been doing is on Telegram. I used to be more resistant to it because I didn't like it as much, but I think the wire thing has sort of faded away. I'm still going to use it, but I'm thinking I'm just going to start posting more on Telegram for those that want to join, for just being the plan for the day, like I've been doing lately, show, prepping, planning to be live in an hour. So give you guys some level of planning. I do think that's important, but thank you for tuning in, guys. I love you all. As always, question everything. Come to your own conclusions. Stay vigilant.
This starts, and it's really fascinating to go back. It starts in 1996 with Netanyahu, who wrote a book called Fighting Terrorism. And the thesis of the book is quite straightforward and very dangerous. He says, there's Hamas, there's Hezbollah, they oppose Israel. It's not good for us to fight them directly. That won't work. What we need to do is topple the governments that back them.
Brzezinski was the strategist for Jimmy Carter and convinced Jimmy Carter to say, look, the Russians are dominating Afghanistan with a civilian secular government. Let's create al-Qaeda. Let's back Osama bin Laden and give his supporters weapons to begin fighting the Russians. And we can pull a coup d'etat there. And the Russians will fight back, and then we'll say the Russians invaded. And it worked. Saudi Arabia made a deal with America that they would push the Wahhabi extremists, the al-Qaeda, the most right-wing wing of Islamic parties, and it worked. Essentially, al-Qaeda is a contract army for the United States. Well, the same thing was happening in Russia. What Brzezinski wrote was that America's faced with a possibility of not being able to rule the world unilaterally. Any country's economic ability to be self-sufficient means potential military power. And in order to prevent any country from threatening America militarily, you have to prevent it from developing economically. The American nightmare, Brzezinski wrote, was that Russia would get together with Germany and with Western Europe, creating Russian raw materials, German industry, and somehow, finally, Russia would become westernized. America, under Brzezinski's strategy, said this would be a disaster because if Russia's westernized, if it becomes democratic, if Europe and Russia are prosperous, then we cannot control them anymore, and they will have no reason to be NATO. We've got to stop Russia, and the place to stop this Russian-European conglomeration is to split it right at the border down Ukraine. Let's do in Ukraine what we did in Afghanistan. Let's back the crazies. Well, most of them are the former neo-Nazi groups that have been so prominent that fly the Nazi flag.